front door.
Absolutely brilliant. That's from Matt. I don't know your last name, Matt, but that is absolute genius. Well played. If it wasn't for the Freezing for Christmas song, I think that might make #1. Very well illustrated, by the way, by the team here. Behind the scenes, the people who created what you're seeing in front of you in this beautiful surroundings. We'll have more of this tomorrow. Coming up next, Peter Cardwell. We'll see you at 6 a.m. sharp.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Well, a very good morning. This is Talk. I'm Peter Cardwell. Thank you so much for your company. Julia Hartley-Brewer is off on holiday. I'm here today between now and 1, so let me know your thoughts on any of the issues we're talking about today. 0344 499 1000 is the number. There's a Turkish crime boss, you're not going to believe this, a Turkish crime boss jailed for heroin offences. He's 70 years old. He's apparently allowed to stay in the UK on, guess what, human rights grounds. Who is saying that? Well, a number of people, including the UN, who can't seem to get anything right at the moment, whether it's about Israel, whether it's about this heroin dealer staying in the UK. Oh, he has a right to a family life and he'd be persecuted if he went home. Well, he's been home a number of times and he's had an affair. So how much does he care about his family life? Well, apparently that's the reason he's staying in this country. We'll talk about that as well. Also, we'll talk about the UK becoming the Western capital for Sharia courts. These are Islamic courts which mean that people can divorce or marry, lots of people not having even basic rights, women not getting the same rights as men. Let's not even talk about gay people or people of any other minority. It is absolutely horrendous. It's happening in Britain today, and we are the Western capital. How long can this tolerance continue? Well, we shouldn't tolerate those kind of courts at all, or those kind of systems. Let me know your thoughts on that. Also, the floppy-haired fascist Justin Trudeau, could he be on the way out? Let's hope so. I stand with the truck drivers who decided not to get the vaccines. I got my vaccines, they decided not to. What did he do? He froze their bank accounts. But, oh, he's a cuddly liberal. No, he's not. He's a fascist. Get him out and get his stupid socks in the bin as well. Tell me your thoughts on any of these stories. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me at 72222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV or follow me at Peter Cardwell. And remember, the main number does three things. You can give me a ring for a live discussion on air. That's what I enjoy doing the most. Or you can send me a voice note under a minute, please, and we'll play those out. Or you can send me a WhatsApp text message. I'm delighted that throughout the morning, Philip Ingram MBE is with me. He's a former senior military intelligence officer. Hello, sir.
Good morning. Isn't it great? We've got two people with the same accent in the studio together.
I use the word advisedly colonised the studio.
Exactly.
So we'll try not to go too Northern Irish. There is a real tendency when two or more are gathered together to get very fast. So we'll try to keep it vaguely understandable. We've hidden the Guinness. Yes, we're not splitting the G this time. I've never had a pint of Guinness ever in my life.
Have you not?
No. Well, I stopped drinking six years ago.
Oh, okay.
It's lonely up here in the Mole High
Well,
ground.
Guinness Zero is actually very, very good and very close to. I've started drinking that.
Still tastes like Guinness though.
Yeah, so, it does.
I've tried Guinness Zero. Not a fan. I must say, I never had a pint of that either. Right then, let's talk through the issues today because there's loads to talk about. This, first of all, actually, before we get into the other stuff, let's talk about the UK forces being sent to Ukraine for a training mission. I mean, given that Trump is coming in about a month's time, wants to end the war in Ukraine, do you think A, this will happen, and B, should it happen, Philip?
I think it may happen next year. We've got the UK making this statement and John Healey refusing to say it's not going to happen.
Defence Secretary,
the Defence Secretary. We've had Francois Macron, the French President, turning around saying NATO troops should go into Ukraine. And I think there's a slow but sure move to suggest that we're going to see a coalition of the willing moving into providing training inside Ukraine. Of course, we provide at the moment under Operation Interflex. That's an international operation based in the UK, bringing Ukrainian troops or Ukrainian civilians out of Ukraine, training them in to become basic soldiers and then sending them back to Ukraine. Logistically, it would be so much better if it could happen inside Ukraine. But there's a lot that has to be put in place.
What about the fact that, at what stage are we, I know it's obviously a proxy war with Russia anyway, but at what stage are we actually assisting them? If we're in the country, is that... how does that sort of tally in terms of the essentially supporting them to a huge degree, and how would Russia view that? I'm not saying we should do anything because Russia says we should or shouldn't do it, but certainly the level of assistance, the money, £3 billion a year that we give Ukraine, I mean, is this a good idea?
Well, it's a developing idea, and I think we want to get serious about helping Ukraine to defeat the Russians.
We are pretty serious already.
And we are serious already. And I think this is all aiming at Donald Trump coming in. It's amazing how all these things are coming in as he gets closer and closer to his inauguration. There are three conflicts around the world. Europe with Russia, Ukraine, the Middle East blowing up, and Southeast Asia with what China's doing in his expansionism in Southeast Asia and threatening Taiwan. We can't expect the Americans. Donald Trump's going to say America can't take on all three. So it's going to turn around to Europe and say, you need to deal with or take a greater lead in what's going on inside Europe with Ukraine and Russia. And this is one way of doing it. But we have to then think about what if the Russians fire ballistic missiles into the training camps and kill British soldiers or British and French soldiers or anyone else that's in there. Do we then impose a no-fly zone over part of Ukraine? Do we split Ukraine down the centre, and we have the west of Ukraine is under effectively NATO or a coalition force control, including the airspace, and the fighting happens in the east? We don't take part in that. A lot to come in this. And then we're hearing political statements out of the Ministry of Defence, and it's frustrating. At the same time, John Healey announced £225 million going to Ukraine to help support this training. He suggested it's UK defence money. It's not. It comes out of the International Fund for Ukraine. That's administered by the UK, but on the board there's UK, Norway, Netherlands, Denmark, Sweden, Lithuania, and Australia, New Zealand, and Iceland all contribute to the fund.
Well, we'll see where this goes. We'll see what John Healey says. We certainly have a strong hint anyway that UK soldiers poised to train troops in Ukraine. Let us know your thoughts about this. Is it right that our boys and girls go to Ukraine to train troops there? Is this a good development? Let me know your thoughts. 0344 499 1000. I want to ask Philip as well about Sharia law, but let me just actually see a couple of messages. First of all, Steve says Sharia has no place in Britain. If people want to live by their rules and laws, then let them do so in another country, but no doubt Labour will endorse it soon. Ian says, I think Sharia law is much wider than women's rights. You cannot have kangaroo courts. This issue you should be discussing is why these people think Sharia law has any jurisdiction in this country. Yeah, it is a lot more than women's rights. There's no doubt about that, but that's just one aspect of it. And you have an absurd situation where you have people being able to marry or divorce just by simply saying divorce 3 times. Also, we have the fact that Sharia courts give daughters half as much inheritance as sons. There is an app that is involved here as well, an app for Muslims in England and Wales to create Islamic wills. It is a drop-down menu for men to say how many wives they have, which is between 1 and 4. Let me know your thoughts on this. 0344 499 1000. Britain revealed as the Western capital for a use of Sharia courts. Philip, I'm really concerned about this.
I'm very concerned about this, and this is the sort of thing that the European Court of Human Rights should be focused on, and not on stopping us deporting criminals.
We'll get to that in a second.
Making sure that there's
a heroin dealer, yeah,
exactly. Making sure that there's equality, and what I think there's calling these Sharia courts. They are rules that are being set inside a particular part of our society. It doesn't usurp then the national rules. So if someone is married through the normal legal process in the UK, the Sharia courts can't dissolve that marriage. They can say you two can separate in the eyes of the community, but they then have to go through the formal divorce process and legal process. But it's one step up the rung of a ladder to completely inappropriate behaviour.
And we're the Western capital here. This is happening far more in the UK than any other Western country. There's a big investigation in the Times today, and I think that there's a very interesting. There's a very interesting debate here about the difference between tolerance and acceptance. Yeah. And I think that we can't tolerate this, actually. We shouldn't tolerate this, because there are people who have no choice, especially women, lots of other people as well, but people who don't have any choice but to do what their community tells them to do. And that is not something that, we have British values in this country, and this needs to be stamped out.
We come from a part of the world where when communities policed themselves and did this sort of thing, we saw women being tarred and feathered. We saw people being kneecapped in the streets. And this is one step before that. Yeah. So it has to stop.
Yeah, absolutely. Let us know your thoughts about the fact that Britain has been revealed as the Western capital for use of Sharia courts. Or maybe you think that Sharia courts are actually a good thing. Let me know your thoughts on any of that. 0344 499 1000. If you've never given me a ring before, you're very, very welcome to do so. In all of my shows, I get as many people on the air as possible, because this is my show, but it's your show too, and I want to make sure that as many people get on the air as possible between now and 1 o'clock. If you've never done it before, you pick up the phone, dial the number, you make your point, and we'll ring you back between now and 1 o'clock and get as many people on the air as possible. Alicia's on the phone today. You just have a chat with her. She's very nice, believe me. 0344 499 1000. Well, let's talk about that heroin dealer, because this is a Turkish crime boss, sounds like an absolute scumbag, who has been causing a huge amount of misery to so many people, heroin addicts. Literally people at their lowest ebb, and he is pushing heroin onto them. He is said to be one of Britain's biggest drug dealers, but he can't be deported after judges ruled it would breach his human rights. What about the human rights of people who are taking his heroin? He was jailed for 16 years for plotting to supply heroin across the UK. He won the right to remain in this country on the basis that it would breach his human rights to a family life. But he had an extramarital affair with a woman in Turkey. He's talked about the fact that he has would be persecuted if he went to Turkey. Well, he's visited there a number of times. Unsurprisingly, the UN Refugee Agency has backed him.
Yeah. Well, we know what the UN are like, but there's a few things that are being misreported about this. It's people say it's down to the European Court of Human Rights. Well, actually, Germany, France, other European countries are subject to exactly the same thing. In February, France deported a Tunisian imam for making what they called unacceptable comments about the French flag. and just ignored, and Germany and France ignored the European Court of Human Rights. So this is UK judges' interpretation of it, and therefore
they clearly interpret it far too liberally, and the fact that they say, oh well, we might be in some way challenged by this, therefore let's back away from it just in case this happens. I mean, there are other countries, as you correctly say, Philip, who go, do you know what? Stuff this for a game of soldiers. Let's deport them. We'll deal with the consequences.
Yeah, exactly, and this is where if our judiciary can't get their act together and be more robust in dealing with people who are a threat to society, because the police are saying he remains a threat to society.
Yes.
Then
the Home Office says he remains a threat to society as well.
And therefore, what the Home Office should do, as part of the government, is bring in more legislation to compel UK judges to come down much harder on individuals and get rid of them. We shouldn't, as UK taxpayers, have to pay for them. If we can't afford to pay the waspy women, we can't afford to keep foreign criminals in our prisons.
And also, I mean, the problem with foreign criminals in our prisons is a capacity issue as well, isn't it? I mean, we could really solve that problem. Although there are issues around that, aren't there, in terms of saying, well, actually, if we deported him to Turkey, would he actually serve time in prison there? Or are they going to take him because of these exchange agreements and so on? It's a tricky one, but nonetheless, to me, with this scumbag, it just seems to be fairly straightforward.
Yeah, well, exactly, and with most of them that are in there. And if something happens to them, if they have been found guilty of abuse of children, of violence, of drug dealing, if something happens to them whenever they go to their home country because it's found unacceptable there, oh dear, what a pity.
Well, I can sleep easy in my bed.
Correct.
I'm fair enough about that. Thank you to Steve, who's been in touch. He says, if we send British forces to Ukraine, then we have effectively entered the war with Russia and are legitimate targets. Is this a universal and indirectly engaging NATO too? What do you think of that, Philip?
It's a very, very fine line, and that is a point of debate that needs to be looked at very carefully. Provided you could argue that we're directly engaged now because we're training Ukrainian forces, we're supplying British weapons.
Will Russia see the difference? Will Putin go, oh well, it's a subtle difference, but now they're in the war.
Exactly, and physically doing it inside Ukraine doesn't make a great difference to that. The difference it makes is it's much easier for Russia to directly target British troops who are part of the training. The international legal basis on this is something that is a very grey area. Now, that's a basis of consensus, and it's the Security Council of the United Nations that would be the ultimate arbiter. Well, Russia's got a veto, and so has China. So there's no right or wrong in it. It's a move forward, and it's a move closer to NATO and the West getting more directly involved in the conflict. Yeah.
Philip, thank you. We'll take your calls, texts and tweets, and Philip is remaining with me right through to 1 o'clock, so you can talk to both of us today. I can see the phones going. 0344 499 1000. Text me at 7222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV or follow me at Peter Cardwell. Loads to talk about between now and 1 o'clock. Stay with us here on Talk.
the government was going to be the government of public service. And I think people were at least expecting, you know, after the Tories and they got themselves into the tangle with Liz Truss and Boris Johnson and Partygate and everything else, that, OK, fine, we'll give you a chance. But they expected Labour to live up to that chance. And when you end up in a situation where you're just the same as the last lot, then you end up with the Except worse. It's hypocrisy because you were promising something different.
Rachel Reeves has now been accused this morning in the papers of derailing the economy. You know, there is no part of business that thinks that she's done a good job. Her reputation is now in the toilet.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Thanks everybody who's ringing in and contacting me. Let's start with Robert in Hertfordshire on Sharia courts. Robert, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Good morning, Peter.
Morning.
This is a coincidence. I was already doing some research before your show come on. And even on Google, the figures are very, very vague. I mean, I was quoted that there was 185 Sharia courts, first of all. Now they're saying it's 130. Even the amount of mosques, I was quoted at 1,500. Now they're saying it's more like 3,000.
Well, I suppose it's very difficult, especially with Sharia courts, because they're not exactly advertising that they're available, because they are therefore they you know, only Muslims go through them. It's not any other ethnicity, and they're very.
I'm finding out all sorts of things that horrify me. I didn't know that Muslims are not allowed to pay interest.
Well, I mean, some are. It depends how observant you are. But yes, there are Islamic banks that don't pay interest. For example, that is against sort of the strong Islamic law and so on. I mean, look, there are lots of aspects of this. I'm less concerned about the interest rates. But yeah, I know what you mean. There are lots of things about this.
Even your reply, excuse me, I do apologise, is flexible. I mean, there's nobody's. You know, I think we've been suffocated by two words: woke and tolerance in this country. And woke and tolerance has pushed us to a point now where everybody's jumping up and down and bumping into the furniture.
Well, I agree with you, and I think that the problem is that because it's gone too far, Robert, and because we've gone, oh, well, it's a cultural sensitivity, things like cousin marriage, for example, we're talking about recently, you know, Sharia law. Well, because it's a cultural sensitivity, we can't intervene. No. What is wrong with saying, do you know what? Sharia courts are, if you want to have them in other countries that have Islamic law, that's up to you. Here in the United Kingdom, we don't have that. We have British values. We have ways in which we do things. We have a legal system here. You will adhere to those rules, as many Muslims do. Some don't because they go to Sharia courts. But, you know, this is our way of life here, and this is what we stand up for. And actually, there are very few other countries where this would be tolerated.
I've got one final question for you, because you're a very intelligent guy, and I actually hang on your every word.
Goodness, that's a bit scary.
But when we was talking about Muslims can have up to 4 wives, does that mean they can claim 4 wives benefits?
Well, I hope not. And I mean, they shouldn't be having. Doesn't mean they can claim. Philip Ingram's here.
Yeah, I saw. I was researching this a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
And I may be wrong, but because it's just flashed in my memory. But there is a government policy on claiming benefits for more than one.
For
spouse.
multiple wives, right? Yeah. Ted is our producer. Ted, can we check that and see what the policy is? Robert, we will find out. If you keep watching, we will tell you. Robert in Hertfordshire, thank you very much. Appreciate your thoughts on that. And Gray has been in touch saying if people know they can have Sharia law in this country, then that's a huge draw to Islamic immigrants. There should be one law, ours. This is not an Islamic country. Gray, I totally agree with you. And I mean, why are we the Western capital and why is this tolerated? Rob is in Cheshire and has given me a ring, 0344 499 1000. Rob, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Well, I'm just thinking, if you've got Sharia, I've lived in the Middle East since 1986, and so when you've got Sharia law, you've got to realise what they're going to do with all the prisoners, where the prisons are already full. For example, if you get done for drinking and driving, you've got a month in jail,
right?
About £700 fine. You know, they go to jail for the smallest of things, through Sharia law. So are they going to go to the prisons, even though the prisons are full?
Well, no, because they're not part of the same justice system as the Sharia law. I mean, has no relation to our legal system. There's not if something happens in a Sharia law, a Sharia court, it's not going to have any effect on our prisons. But I mean, Rob, what do you think of the principle more generally? Because if I were, look, there are people who are very strongly religious. They believe this is something that matters. Should they be listened to, or should we just say, actually, no, sorry, this is antithetical to what we do in this country?
We're British, I mean, the world around goes basically off the British law because it's very respected. We don't want a law that's 400 years or 2,000 years old or whatever it is. But in other countries, they don't accept British law. Like in Dubai, for example, they do actually in DIFC, Dubai International Financial Centre. That's only to get the corporate financial institutions in. Otherwise, they wouldn't have come. But with the rest of it, it's Sharia law. So why should we accept it? The others don't accept it. They don't accept it.
Well, I think that's a really good point, Rob. Thank you for it. Rob, give me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Apparently you can't claim benefits from multiple wives in the UK because polygamy is illegal and not recognised in the benefit system. That's what the House of Commons Library says anyway. Okay. So happy to clarify that point. Thank you as well in regard to Ukraine. Peter has been in touch, great name, says, I've lost count of how many times I've said this, but you and the British public have been lied to about the Ukraine war from the beginning. The reasons of why, when and how were never explained truthfully, and because of that, over 600,000 people, Ukrainians, who should have a life, lay dead. Peter, what do you think the actual reasons are? What are we not being told here? I wonder what your reaction is to that, Philip.
I think there's a lot of conspiracy theories around that are trying to put in. There's one reason why so many people are dead, and that's Vladimir Putin ignored the internationally recognised boundaries of Ukraine, first in 2014 and then again in February 2022, whenever he carried out his re-invasion. He wanted to topple the Ukrainian government. He put a very audacious plan together to do that and failed miserably because it was too ambitious.
He thought it would be so quick, wouldn't he? And actually the Ukrainians fought back, and very bravely too.
Exactly. And therefore he's had to try and seek a secondary objective, which is the Donbass in the east. The breakaway elements of the Donbass were a Russian FSB, so they're an SVR creation. They were created by Russian intelligence agencies. They spent time after Zelensky came in, going across Ukraine, trying to get different areas to break away to, because Zelensky was going to bring in a lot of anti-corruption, or an anti-corruption approach. Zelensky wasn't liked when he was first brought in because he was anti-corruption and was westernising the government. Russia didn't like the westernisation of the government.
Well, more on this, more on the fact that Sharia law is, we are the Western capital, apparently, in Britain for that. We're also talking about the Turkish crime boss jailed for heroin offences, allowed to remain in the UK on, guess what, human rights grounds. What do you think of all of this? Let me know your thoughts. 0344 499 1000. Stay with us here on Talk.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Well, thanks to everybody who has been in touch. Philip has been doing some research during the break on Sharia law and whether people with multiple wives can claim benefits. Philip, what are you finding out?
Well, what I'm finding out is there's a difference between a polygamous marriage and polyamorous relationships.
Just explain that to us.
So a polygamous marriage is where someone who is physically married under the law gets married under the law to someone else, and you can't be married twice in that way. Polyamorous relationships recognise where there are marriages that have been carried out legally with multiple wives in other countries, where it's legal there, and then come to this country and have got a benefit system that's designed to support child support for additional children and things that are in that. Now, I'm bringing together stories from 2021 and stories that are in the House of Commons library. So what I haven't had time to do is pull together and see whether there's anything else new that has...
Keep going while I talk to Ivan Sampson. He's an immigration lawyer, and we'll get to the bottom of this. Ivan is with us now, Ivan Sampson, immigration lawyer, and we want to talk about this story about the Turkish crime boss jailed for heroin offences, allowed to remain in the UK on human rights grounds. Ivan, should he remain here or should he be sent to Turkey?
Well, the law says that he can remain here. We've got very strong...
Oh, Ivan's just breaking up there. Ivan, we have a problem with the line. We'll see if we can get Ivan back on the line there. Thank you to Dorothy from East Kilbride, who's been in touch on WhatsApp messages, 0344 499 1000. Good morning, Peter. JD Vance was not far wrong when he stated the UK could become the first truly Islamist country with a nuclear weapon. Surely even the lefties must now see the pendulum has swung too far to the Muslim population. I do not want to have any other law other than British law. Sharia law must now be outlawed. I should say it's not every Muslim, obviously, who would go to a Sharia court, but there are quite a few Muslims who do, and this is something that we need to be very, very cautious about, and we need to say that it's just not okay. It's just not okay that this happens and that people are being discriminated against as a result. If you're in this country, you have the rights, the privileges, and of course the responsibilities of being in this country, and that's something that I would argue anyway that this Turkish crime boss does not have. I'll go back to Ivan in a second once we get him on a better line, but let's talk about Sharia courts again because David is in the London area. David, you've given me a ring, 0344 499 1000. You're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Yeah, hi Peter. I just wanted to try and bring some clarity to the Sharia courts.
Okay.
As far as I understand, and I'm no sort of fan of Islam, far from it, but as far as I'm aware, that these are for members of that faith only, and they are religious courts. And we have the same thing with Judaism. So there are rabbinical courts, obviously, in the UK, and they've been here for decades, if not centuries. And for example, if two members of the Jewish faith wish to get divorced, but at some later point remarry somebody else or marry somebody else, they need to get the approval of the rabbinical court, and they need to get something called a get. And that's where, again, it's the man stands in front of the woman, says, I divorce you 3 times, then they have the approval of the rabbinical court to do that. This is exactly the same with the Sharia courts. So they are religious courts and don't have any bearing on English law.
I get that, David, but I think the point is that there is a rules-based aspect to them, perhaps not legal, but a rules-based aspect. For example, daughters getting half as much inheritance as sons, and that is something that Sharia law actually talks about, and indeed is being enforced by Sharia law.
No, I totally understand that. I'm no fan of...
No, I know you're not.
Courts.
I know you're not. Yeah.
No fan of any religious courts. But I just wanted to say that that's what those courts are designed to do, and it affects the people within those religions. I personally would not want to sign up to any of that.
Yeah.
But of
course, some people don't have the option. Some people may be forced through this system, and that is very unfair, especially when they're not getting the basic rights that people have in this country.
Absolutely, and I think what we need to do as a country is to be very cautious of these courts, and I think we need to monitor those courts very carefully, whether it's Islam, Judaism. I think there's even something possibly in the Sikh religion as well, because fundamentally it's the civil liberties of people in this country must outweigh the religious courts in this country.
I completely agree. Listen, thank you very much indeed. That's David there making some very good points there. Andy in Derby has been in touch as well. Says, morning Peter, happy Christmas. Happy Christmas, Andy. Regarding the Turkish heroin dealer who had been granted the right to stay here despite the Home Office request to deport, can I please offer the following thought? He's claimed and been granted the right to a family life, but what about the right to a family life of poor addicts that he helped to create? I can only imagine the strife and heartache existing in those families as a result of his crimes. Yet another ridiculous decision that demonstrates what a soft touch we are. Keep up the great work, says Andy. Well, let's put those points now to Ivan Sampson, the immigration lawyer. Ivan, thank you for rejoining us. I know there's some technical issues there. Tell us whether you think this heroin dealer should be here in the UK.
Look, I sympathise with the public who absolutely, we don't want people like this living in the UK. However, the Secretary of State has strong powers to deport foreign nationals. It's there under the Borders Act. Anyone convicted of an offence which carries a sentence of more than 12 months has to be automatically deported. Now, our laws are subject to the laws, the treaty, Article 8 in particular, in this case, of the European Convention on Human Rights. So even if the Secretary of State wanted to remove somebody, she'd be subject to European law.
Yes, but we have lots of other countries that ignore that and do what they want in that regard. And you have the excuses that hold on a second. We have the excuses that this dude is talking about, this heroin dealer, this heroin kingpin, talking about right to a family life, yet he's had affairs. He says that he'd be persecuted if he goes to Turkey, yet he's been there at least 8 times. This doesn't stack up.
Well, look, the courts look at the composite right. It's not just the rights of the individual, it's also the rights of family members, those who are settled here. And it's a balancing exercise. And I'm afraid when you have someone with a wife and a child who's been in the UK for more than 7 years, I've seen time and time again, the public's rights is out-trumped by those rights. The only way we can remove foreign criminals and give the power back to the Secretary of State is to come out the European Convention. So don't blame the law and don't blame the courts. Now, if you want to change the law, and I know
we are blaming the courts. We are blaming the courts in this example, Ivan, because we're in a situation where his excuses don't seem to stack up. He's talking about a right to family life, and you're talking about his fellow members of his family. Do they want someone? Have they been asked? Do they want someone who has been a cheater, who has gone off? And I'm not standing in moral judgment of people who go off with other people, but I am standing in moral judgment of someone who is a heroin kingpin. And the rights to the family life of his family, to me, don't matter.
Well, I'm not going to defend this individual. What I will defend is the evidence. And the evidence is that he's been here 10 years without offending. He has a wife, which he's
been 10 years without being caught. I mean, he is a heroin kingpin. And the fact is that he's one of Britain's biggest drug dealers. He may not have necessarily had a conviction, but I don't think he's been working in Tesco's for that time.
But Pete, I sympathise with you. As I said, the only way we can remove these people is if we come out the convention. Now, people like Richard Tyson, Nigel Farage are saying this. I never thought I'd support Suella Braverman. But you know what? I'm afraid if you want to remove foreign criminals, you won't be able to do that if they have settled family members in the UK. And in these circumstances, quite often you see the courts trumping the rights of the public against the rights of this family. So I'm afraid you're going to get more and more decisions like this.
But how can that be right? I mean, even within the European Convention on Human Rights, how can the human rights of this scumbag and his family trump the rights of people who he has caused a huge amount of misery to? I mean, the ECHR doesn't make sense in that regard, and we do have other countries that disregard those aspects and do what they want.
Well, if you're asking our country to disregard the rule of law, then yes, the courts can do that.
I'm not saying they should disregard the rule of law necessarily. I'm saying they should look to other countries and how they interact with the ECHR, which they don't seem to be doing.
Well, what they look to is the convention itself and the cases that have come before the courts. That's the precedents that have been set. And the court will be minded about that. And if he has strong family life in the UK, the court has said it would be unjustifiably harsh to expect his family members to live in, for this case, Turkey. And the courts are well within their rights to make that judgment.
Do the family members have to go if he gets deported? I don't think they do.
Well, they don't have to go, but they don't have to. But then you're going to break the family tie. So it's a proportionality assessment. Is it disproportionate to affect immigration control and to break those family ties?
Well, we have evidence. My beef is with the courts here, because we have evidence that he doesn't care about family life. He cares about family life when it comes to staying in the UK. He doesn't care about family life when it comes to cheating on his wife.
Well, look, you're focusing on this individual. And the court, as I said, look at the composite right of the family as a whole. And that's the balancing exercise.
But he's the criminal. I don't care about them. He's the criminal. There are lots of people who have a criminal in their family. The criminal goes to prison. Their family life is broken up as a result of that. Whether he's in prison in the UK or whether he's in prison in Turkey, does that make a difference?
Well, it does, because the case law is against you. Biekubet is the leading case on this issue. And what that case says, which the courts have to follow, that the family life is looked as a whole. They're looked as one single unit. And if another member in that unit is going to have unjustifiably harsh consequences, then I'm afraid you're going to get judgments like this.
You can see, Ivan, can't you, how people look at cases like this, and there are many cases like this, and just think, this is nonsense. We should just derogate or withdraw from the European Convention on Human Rights. You can see how this gives succor to the people who have that argument. You can see very clearly how there are people who believe this to be the case, and they see examples like this and just think, what is the point? I mean, this law just doesn't make sense to so many people.
Look, Peter, I agree with you. I sympathise. There's countries, like I spend a lot of time in the UAE, where I have a lot of clients, and in the UAE, if you commit an offence, you'll be deported within days. There are no rights of appeal. Foreign criminals are not accepted in the UAE, and the country has quite a right to remove them, and they do. And so if you want to go down that line, then, like you said, we've got to think about coming out the convention.
Okay, Ivan, thank you. That's Ivan Sampson there, an immigration lawyer. I mean, this is just defies logic, Philip.
It does, and the French and the Germans and other European countries that are part of the same convention, you ignore it completely, and there's no consequences for them. So this, as you say, comes down to the courts, interpretation of the law, and they can't just blame the ECHR. Yeah, they can't just say it's about that. And well, what Ivan was quoting there was case law. That isn't ECHR case law. That's case law in the United Kingdom, and therefore the government can turn around and legislate to change that. It's changing the law, and it should do.
It absolutely should. I would be surprised if, but delighted if Ed Cooper brings that forward as Home Secretary. Herbie is in London and has given me a ring about this, 0344 499 1000. Herbie, what do you think about this Turkish crime boss? Do you think his right to family life is incredibly important?
Peter, I think we've lost the plot completely now.
Agreed.
We surrender. We've surrendered our rights and everything else. We've got a spineless government and we've got a spineless judges. They do not see the light of day.
It's not just this government, Herbie. It's successive governments, it's successive courts that have said. And I mean, Ivan was saying there, don't blame the courts. I think we can blame the courts. I think very straightforwardly.
Well, they're the ones who do passing the judgment, so the courts are the ones to blame.
Yes,
they're not listening. They're not listening to the people. They're not listening to the facts. We don't need these people here. We've got enough problems without importing them and keeping them here. What's the point? We're spending and wasting money on illegal immigrants. We're wasting money on criminals from abroad. In God's name, when's it going to stop? This country's finished.
Well, Herbie, if there are Turkish people who want to come to this country and contribute in some way, and they want to fill skills gaps, for example, that we don't have enough people trained in this country, I'm a bit more relaxed about that than I am about a crime boss said to be one of Britain's biggest drug dealers. I mean, there are countries where he wouldn't get the benefits of living in a nice, cosy prison cell. He wouldn't get the benefits of a family life. He wouldn't get the benefits of life, actually. He would be put to death. Now, I am not in favour of the death penalty, but I do think that a lot of people will see this. They will see how this person is living. They will see how his right to a family life, which he doesn't seem to care about himself because he's cheating on his wife. I'm not standing in moral judgment of people who cheat on their wife. I'm merely saying it is very, very clear here that he doesn't care about a family life. The law's an ass, Herbie.
Well, Peter, as I've just said, we have lost everything. We're giving in to everything and everybody. We've got spineless people that are running the country. We've got spineless people that are supposed to be passing the laws. When's it all going to stop? When's it going to come to an end? It can't carry on like this because it's becoming to be impossible to live and walk the streets and safety and everything.
The world has gone mad, but this country's gone beyond belief. It's unrecognisable now, Peter, and it's a shame that we've lost our identity, and that's what gets me. We've lost our identity of what we used to be.
Herbie, thanks for that. Philip, do you think we've lost our identity as a country?
I think we're well on the path to that, and it goes back to one of our earlier callers who talked about woke intolerance. What we're allowing to happen in the country, I think, it's not just European Court of Human Rights, it's wider than that. It's minorities dictating to the majority, when the reality is we've got this the wrong way around. We should tolerate minority and minority view and accept that, and you bring it in as part of society, but we don't allow minority view to dictate what it is that's going on. We need to get back to our own values.
Thank you, Philip Ingram, the former senior military intelligence officer, who's with me all throughout the show. Thanks to everybody who has been in touch, including George in Blackpool. My nephew, actually, whose birthday is tomorrow. In fact, he's 12 years old, lives just down the road in Lytham. Actually, George, so Ivan emphasised the rights of the family unit. Says, George, could we apply the same grouping when a criminal is convicted? Send them all to prison. Without doubt, they will have to be they will have benefited from the profits of this crime. So the accessories to the fact. Well, listen, there's no suggestion that this scumbag's family benefited in any way, that they are in any way criminally liable. We're not suggesting that for a second. But yeah, if the family life is incredibly important, well, how important do they think it is? Is it important legally? Is it important so we can stay in this country, or is it something that they really deeply care about? PJ has been in touch and says, good morning, Peter. Taxation without representation is tyranny. Stop believing Labour has your best interest at heart. I'm not sure I did, PJ. If the unions really believe that the OAP fuel crisis was bad, they would bring the country to a halt. They're only interested when their money is on the line. And Sue has been in touch. She says, I can't believe people are finally waking up to the fact that Sharia is operating. I've written into talk, I've complained to my MP for years, to still no avail. Why has everyone been ignoring this? Well, listen, we have covered it on the programme before, but this is a news story. It's in the Times today, actually. Times newspaper, Britain revealed as the Western capital. Big investigation, and that's why we're talking about it. Thank you to Sue, who says, why has everyone been ignoring this? It's what's driving the upsurge in Muslim immigration, says Sue. Final thought from Philip.
Well, I've got to the bottom of this.
Good man.
Polygamy and all the rest of it. It's in a House of Commons paper dated 1st of February 23 called Polygamy. And it says it is possible for all parties in a polygamous marriage to be legally present in the UK if they've got married in a country.
So if you've married elsewhere, if you've got more than one wife elsewhere.
And when it comes to benefits, it says for polygamous marriages to be considered valid in the UK, that are considered valid in the UK, an award for certain means-tested benefits and tax credits can be made for more than one spouse.
Okay.
That's in the House of Commons library.
Interesting. Well, thanks for that. We've got to the bottom of that issue. And we are happy to answer your questions on this and find out what's going on, because I think there are a lot of people asking lots of questions about what is legal, what is not, and what people are actually entitled to. It's a lot about rights, but also about responsibilities. What about the responsibility, perhaps, of not supplying heroin and ruining people's lives? That, to me, would trump this person's view of liberty. We're talking about all of this. We're talking about the Turkish crime boss jailed for heroin offences. We're talking about Sharia law. We're also talking about low traffic neighbourhoods, because Sadiq Khan, soon to be Sir Sadiq Khan, Knight of the Realm, cannot stop councils from removing unpopular low traffic neighbourhoods, a court has ruled. There's a court that appears to have got something right. We'll talk to Alan Miller from the Together Declaration in just a second. Stay with us.
government was going to be the government of public service. And I think people were at least expecting, you know, after the Tories and they got themselves into the tangle with Liz Truss and Boris Johnson and Partygate and everything else, that, OK, fine, we'll give you a chance. But they expected Labour to live up to that chance. And when you end up in a situation where you're just the same as the last lot, then you end up with the
Except worse.
Except worse. It's hypocrisy because you were promising something different.
Rachel Reeves has now been accused this morning in the papers of derailing the economy. You know, there is no part of business that thinks that she's done a good job. Her reputation is now in the toilet.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Now then, Sadiq Khan, the Mayor of London, has been, a court has ruled against him, and our thoughts and prayers are with him today because he can't stop councils from removing unpopular low-traffic neighbourhoods. Maybe you've got a low-traffic neighbourhood in your area, this tyranny that means that you've got to do certain things and you'll be fined if you don't do the right thing. A court has ruled a lengthy legal battle over 3 controversial schemes in East London. Let's talk to Alan Miller, who's co-founder of the Together Declaration. Alan, thank you very much indeed for joining us this morning. I find myself in the strange position of being in favour of Luftar Rahman, the Mayor of Tower Hamlets. It must be weird for you too, Alan.
Well, it's absolutely the case that I'm in favour of this. And actually, he stood on his election was primarily one of the key factors was to abolish this LTN. And in defence of him, he then did another consultation just to reinforce it democratically, a true consultation where he engaged with people, not just put it out where no one could see it and then ignore the responses like the Mayor of London did with his non-consultation. So he'd already been voted in on the basis he was going to dispense with these 3 particular low-traffic neighbourhoods, which have completely clogged up the area and a really important hub. And also, as the Luftar Rahman makes the point, detrimentally impacting lots of working people. That's where the traffic gets pushed out to. That's where the most impacts occur. Also impacting people with limited mobility, older people, women at night, consequences for everyone, as we've seen. The consultation got all sorts of responses back that we've seen around the country, Peter, which is that people are furious that their ability to move around, to make decisions about how they do things at work or with family, with their cars, gets limited, restricted, fined and surveyed.
Well, what actually happens in a low-traffic neighbourhood? Because there'll be a lot of people around the country who aren't really familiar with what it is. I mean, the title gives a clue, but what is it actually like to drive or operate within one of them, Alan?
It's a roadblock. They're bollards. They were brought in under lockdowns, under the term emergency traffic orders. And basically, they were never discussed. It was another unprecedented moment where the idea was that you would have bollards and cameras stopping vehicles being able to come in to the area. So you became much more pedestrianised. People said, well, why don't we cycle? So TfL's announcement is, well, we want people to be able to walk and cycle. How about you get all the trains running and get logistics sorted and get rid of the problems with air quality in the underground TfL, right? Rather than telling us we all need to cycle and walk, because many people cannot cycle and walk, not least if you're a tradesperson and you've got to have tools. And David Lammy said, get on the bus or get on the underground. Contempt for working people. What it means is that people get fined. You've got bollards. It's a bit like Checkpoint Charlie, a bit like in the old Hamlet system that you'd be charged a toll to move from one area to another.
You're not comparing it to West and East Germany, I hope.
Well, absolutely. The idea that we have these really egregious restrictions, draconian measures, Peter, right?
Yeah, but it's not the Stasi, Alan.
Well, what I would say is that if you're not able to make decisions about how you can move around in your actual area and you've responded that you do not want it, and the majority have done in many instances, and you're ignored, and you're told this is for your own good and you need to put up or shut up, then there are many similarities.
Okay,
right?
I think we'll respectfully disagree on that point. Alan, what are the legal implications here? Do you think other parts of the country will perhaps hesitate when they see this ruling and perhaps not have a low traffic neighbourhood? Because there are quite a few of them right throughout the country, not just in London, of course.
Yeah, they've happened all across the country. We've seen a lot of victories where local people from business communities and citizens have stood against them and they've been taken out. We've, whether that's been in Warrington and other areas in Bristol, East Bristol, we've worked with a lot of people locally, regionally, nationally to challenge and do calls to action and make sure the press are aware of it. We've seen in Oxford, they've decimated businesses. Clint Pugh has been very vocal about that, and we've done many interviews with local tradespeople there. What this means is a very particular case where this mayor who got voted in, the local mayor who got voted in, said that in his mandate this would be part of what he would do, and then did a consultation. It basically has meant legally that it's saying there won't be an appeal because some people call them gentrifiers, but some very wealthy, more middle-class people have sort of said, we want these LTNs in here. We're going to appeal this again. It's another 30,000. The judges said they won't listen to that appeal, but they'll have to recognise it, but they don't think it will stand because on every basis, this does not have merit. But actually, Peter, we're saying we should not rely on the legal system. It shouldn't be up to the discretion of a judge. We should be able to assert democratically the rights of decisions. And if the majority of people want something, that's one thing. But let's have a cost-benefit analysis. Let's be honest and open. Let's engage with proper scrutiny and not have lies like we've seen with the Mayor of London, 4,000 deaths. Absolutely unfounded. Our reports demonstrate that.
Just not true. Yeah, you're right. You're right, Alan. There's been a lot of propaganda and nonsense in regard to this, especially when it comes to the air quality. And as you correctly say, if you look at the air quality on the tube in London, where this isn't just a London story, it's right across the country as well. But if you look at the air quality on the tube, for example, it's dreadful.
Yeah, and what we've seen as well is a lot of people have become so furious. So, for instance, these low emission zones as well, they're linked to the low traffic neighbourhoods. People should know there's this thing called livable streets. Together we campaigned. The last Prime Minister said he'd have an inquiry into low traffic neighbourhoods, and we got the Department of Transport to stop funding Liverpool streets because the whole emphasis and push was just basically to shut down our streets and get everyone walking and cycling, and people were very, very upset about it. Now, we've got green billionaires like Christopher Hone and Mike Bloomberg who are backing these initiatives. People always talk about big oil, carbon footprint, who are you in the pay of? This is what's going on. We've got these kind of, and you said it wasn't like Stasi, but at least in China, that you're not allowed to say certain things. Here we've got a situation where there's a pretense of a democratic accountability, but actually you've got very big interest pretending that you've got these grassroots organisations like UK 100, C40 cities. They're massively funded. Big green billionaires, they influence the academy and funding and local democracy, and it's very, very problematic. And we're saying we need to shed light on it, and the public needs to have its voice heard. And actually, Britain was famous at the turn of the 19th century and the 20th century for engineering, for transportation, for being able to move around. Now we're getting put back to a bit of a kind of middle age, move by horse, move by foot and move by cycle. It's just unacceptable.
Alan, thanks for your thoughts there. That's Alan Miller, co-founder of the Together Declaration. Philip, what do you think about these low traffic neighbourhoods and a slap in the face figuratively for Sadiq Khan here? It must be awful for him today. I think can we have a little moment just to remember Sadiq Khan and how difficult it must be for him today?
I think the courts have changed his name to Sadiq Kant.
Like it.
And but one thing worries me in this. This is where a regional mayor has managed to, a local mayor has managed to bring up local issues and force a change in the courts. With the new devolution bill, we're going to get rid of local mayors and we're getting into more regional, Sadiq Kants that are out there who are going to impose things that are linked to central government political.
And that'll be interesting as well in terms of what the government wants to do with housing as well. 1.5 million homes they say will happen before 2029. I'd be very sceptical that will happen. Philip, thank you. Philip's with me right until 1 o'clock. We're going to talk in just a second about Sharia courts. Lots of people want to have a chat about that. Maybe you're one of them. Give me a shout. 0344 499 1000. Lots to discuss next here on Talk. Do stay with us right up until 1 o'clock.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Well, a very good morning. This is Talk. I'm Peter Cardwell. It's just gone 11 o'clock, and I hope you've been with us for the last hour. So I had a spirited debate about all sorts of things, including Sharia law and the fact that there is a drug kingpin, a heroin big drug dealer who is staying in the UK. Why is he staying in the UK? Well, he's got a big prison sentence, but his right to a family life apparently means that he can't be deported to Turkey. The law just doesn't seem to make any sense to me, and I think many other people from what we're hearing from our viewers and listeners. Let me know your thoughts on all of that. We're also talking about floppy-haired fascist Justin Trudeau. He hasn't resigned just yet, but hopefully he'll be on his way out soon. Also, Sir Keir Starmer's Chief of Staff was sent on a secret mission to have a charm offensive on Donald Trump. To me, that Philip Ingram is with me, former senior military intelligence officer. I mean, that would just seem to make a lot of sense. You've got these two allies. People are saying, oh, you know, the transition period is happening, the secret mission, that Morgan McSweeney, who's Keir Starmer's Chief of Staff, was going over to America. To me, that just makes perfect sense.
Yes, it's normal activity.
Yeah.
You know, of course, you're going to try and influence the new regime as it comes in.
Yeah.
And
make
right,
them as friendly to the UK as we can.
It's right and proper that happens, and we have to recognise that from a political perspective. We're slightly on the back foot because Trump will see the Labour Party as Democrats.
Yeah.
In simplistic terms,
Well, many of them campaigned for the Democrats. Some Conservatives did as well.
So we've got a bit of an uphill struggle, and it's right and proper that we are engaging as much as we can.
I heard David Lammy as well, who was being talked about earlier. We were talking to Alan Miller there, and David Lammy was mentioned there. If you haven't seen Celebrity Mastermind, if you haven't seen David Lammy in Celebrity Mastermind, after this programme, go on YouTube, type in David Lammy Celebrity Mastermind. This man is the Foreign Secretary. Have you seen it? Have you seen it, Philip?
Yes.
2 words: Red Leicester. That's which French cheese? His answer was Red Leicester. Which wife of Henry VIII? To which he said Marie Antoinette. There we are. Well, we're talking about Sharia law. This is a big issue. Lots of you ring in. You can get in touch, of course, 0344 499 1000. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV or follow me at Peter Cardwell. You can also send me a voice note on the main number as well, 0344 499 1000. And that's what Simon has done on Sharia law. Let's hear what Simon has to say.
Hi Peter, it's Simon from Devon. With regards to Sharia law, there are lots of religious courts in this country. Sikhism, they opened their first court in London in April 2025. Also with Judaism, they've got their own courts. And also with handing inheritance down to their sons and daughters. Well, Sikhism as a culture only hands their inheritance down to the sons. So personally, as long as it's not impeding on British law, I really don't see what the problem is, because all religions have their own community courts.
An interesting perspective there, one I hadn't heard from Simon. Thank you, Simon, for that. We are the home of free speech. This is where the country comes to talk. And actually, you know, if you have a view that's something we haven't thought of or something we disagree with, that's okay, because in my programmes, we disagree without being disagreeable. Let's get another perspective now from Momus Najmi, who is a writer and commentator. Momus used to be a Muslim, but left Islam 18 years ago. Momus, tell us your perspective on all of this. This is the main story in the Times today, saying that Britain has been revealed as the Western capital for the use of Sharia courts. You're very welcome to the programme.
Hi there. Thank you for having me on. Yeah, I think so. I agree with Simon on a way, like that, you know, the Jewish court also, they have halakha, I think so it's called. And then you have Sikh courts, you have the Islamic Sharia laws and stuff like that. I think so. The problem is that we only see it. The main problem is that people like Simon don't see it as a problem. Right. And the other thing is that we only see these things when they appear, like we only see symptoms when they appear, and then we want to react to those symptoms. But how did these actually happen? So if we want to have freedom of religion, we either say, okay, everything is allowed, or we need to set some sort of boundaries. And
that's the question, isn't it, really? What are the boundaries, and what is just simply a religious matter that actually we can talk about and say, well, that's a religious matter, and if people want to adhere to those courts, that's up to them. But my worry is that it's not a choice for many people. They're having this imposed on them, and they're having rights taken away from them that are not that conflict with the British way of life.
Yeah, and this is directly related to immigration as well, because if you're going to have immigration or mass immigration of whole communities and stuff who are going to live in parallel communities, then people within those communities are going to be trapped, and they will not be able to access the laws of those countries, the rights that host country provides, because they're interlocked by families. And when it comes to families, like a lot of times, like we have less rights if we are in a family, no matter what that family is, right? And no matter what the makeup of that family is. But when it's compounded by a whole community, whole religion, whole religious, teachings and traditions and stuff, then it becomes problematic. So the issue over here is that we have laws against such things. We don't apply those laws. And because we don't apply those laws, there's no encouragement then further on to create more laws against such things.
What is it like?
If we're not going to apply any laws, and if we're going to let people take the mickey out of Britain, then obviously they're going to do it.
Momus, what was it like? I mean, did you know people who were subject to Sharia law, who'd been through Sharia courts and so on? What's your experience of this?
So I haven't personally been involved in any of that, because my family, they were Muslims and they are Muslims and stuff, but they don't really go along with Sharia courts.
So what sort of level of belief do you need to have then to ascribe to Sharia law? We're not talking about, we're clearly not talking about all Muslims here.
Well, this is the issue, right? So the thing is, like, in Islam is there. So a bad Muslim would be a good person and not go along with Sharia law.
Right.
That's how I see it, right? Because we say, like, there's a lot of good Muslims. And I tell them, no, there's not a lot of good Muslims. There are a lot of bad Muslims who are good people.
Right.
So they don't go along with the, strict edicts of Islam. So you have to have, like, the basic thing is you have to believe in Sharia law because it is out of the teachings of Quran and Hadiths. So if you're denying what's in the Sharia law most of the time, and there's no legitimate challenge for it, there's no theological challenge to it, there's no process of challenging to it, that means you are denying Islam in itself, that you only want to believe in what's comfortable. I'm fine with that. But, like, obviously, according to Islam, that won't be fine. Our problem over here is, why are we accepting of other religions?
Well, why is that, do you think? Why are we so tolerant as a society? Because there'll be people who look at this, shrug their shoulders and say, well, listen, if there are Muslims in this country who want to abide by Sharia law, let them.
I think so. The issue is, like, we have this concept of freedom of religion, right? Those ideas were built at a time when there were not that many immigrants in this country, when there were not many other cultures in this country. A long time ago, right? And those people who were coming over here were in the old times, they had to integrate, they had to assimilate because they were coming here for that reason. And if they weren't going to, the application of law was there to remove those people in whatever way possible, right?
Yes.
So we've had those into law, into our psyche over here in Britain for a very, very long time, centuries and centuries and centuries. And then has come a period when people have abused that psyche by mass immigration. So now we want to have some application of the law, but our inherent nature is stopping us from doing it. So we have to get past that hurdle of ourselves, of our own liberal ideas, and say, okay, maybe this time liberalism has gone a bit too far and we need to drag it a bit back, and we need to have some sort of governance which favors the people of this country first.
And how do you actually do that, Momus? Because do you actually say we're going to abolish Sharia courts, we're going to outlaw them in some way? I mean, what do you think is the practical action that should be taken against these courts?
So when it comes to Sharia law, I think so it needs to apply to everyone. It needs to apply to Sharia law, halakha, Sikh courts, or whatever else it might be, apart from anything that is to do with Christianity. Because by the end of the day, it is a Christian country. As long as we have the head of state who is the head of church as well, this is a Christian country, no matter what anyone says, right? So although
the law would be, I mean, the law of this country, many people would say, would be antithetical to many aspects of Christianity, for example. It is a Judeo-Christian system, but there are lots of aspects of law that are against what the Bible says, for example, and that's fine. That's just the way the country is. That's the way the law is.
Yeah, because that religion has grown into being moderate enough to accept those things, right? That's a side matter, right? But the thing is, even if we ban Sharia code, it won't stop people, it won't stop those communities practicing Sharia. It won't stop them from congregating or creating their own shadow Sharia courts. First of all, we need to stop calling them courts, because when you start calling them courts, we're giving them some sort of legitimacy.
Yeah, it's a fair point, isn't it?
Yeah, but secondly, I think so there's a lot of incentives around the people who are experiencing it. We need to remove those incentives, right? The reason why...
What are the incentives?
Well, the incentives out of those people, right? So as far as I see it, the reason why we have Sharia courts so much in UK is because we have the biggest Pakistani population out of any other European country. And Pakistanis are very active with these sort of things. Even in their own country and stuff, there has been a whole movement where the whole Pakistan itself, their Pakistani penal code, which was based on English law, has been changed into Sharia law over the course of time. So you have certain activists that are very active over there, and they are implementing these things, right? The incentive system is, let's say let's talk about marriage, right? When it's second, third, and fourth marriage, which is legitimized by Sharia courts, but obviously not by the law, right?
Yeah.
Why are we giving benefits to those people? Why are those people coming into this country in the first place? They're marrying someone else, and they're bringing that person and that's their second wife, third wife, fourth wife, and they have kids from them. Why are we giving them benefits and stuff, right? So we need to start investigating these cases a bit more. We find out, this person has come in, it's the second wife of this guy, right? We say, well, you're not legitimate like wife over here, so you have to go back. And she says, no, she has family. Or who is your family? Or his father is my uncle. Okay, there's another case now. This is a cousin marriage, right? We need to, like, once you start uncovering more and more, once you start investigating more and more, then you can say, you know what the result is? We need to have consequences for these actions. So we need to deport the lot of you, your whole family, because you have...
Well, if it's people who are born in this country, Momus, who are involved in all of this, because there will be people who are brought out of this country to somewhere like Pakistan, for example, to be married, to be a second or third wife, who are then brought back into the country.
They need to have consequences. So there needs to be something within the law for them to either receive very hefty fines and prison sentences. That there have to be deterrence, right? And also we have to get over this concept that just being born over here does not make you a part of this country. If you're not going to obey by the laws, if you're not going to adhere to the culture and values of this country, it doesn't make you of that country. So it's not like a gotcha thing. It's like, oh, I was born over here, so you can't remove me. No, we should be able to remove you. We should be able to revoke your citizenship. We should be able to talk about...
It does happen in other countries.
It does.
It does happen in other countries.
Within Islamic countries, like the place where I was born in Kuwait, right? They would regularly deport people. They never gave me citizenship because I was born over there. They didn't give me citizenship at all, right? Because they don't believe in those sort of things. And if you commit any crime, even a petty crime, they would deport you and blacklist you for the rest of...
Where would they deport you to in Kuwait? If you're in Kuwait,
you come here. Let's say you come from Pakistan.
But if you're born in Kuwait, can they deport you?
Yes, of course.
They revoke your citizenship, but where do they deport you to if you don't have citizenship elsewhere?
They don't give you citizenship, right? So they don't give you citizenship to begin with. You have a default citizenship of your parents.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so you would get back. And even if, let's say, someone throws away their passports and come over, first of all, they don't really give amnesty to anyone. They don't really give refuge to people and stuff. Even if they gave refuge to people, they would just deport them to the last port of call. They are okay doing that. Right,
what would you say? Okay, let me just ask you one more thing before you go, Momus. What would you say to? There will be a lot of people who say, you know, even discussing this, even having this discussion is a racist thing, or is culturally insensitive, or that we need to be more understanding of Islam or Judaism or Sikhism or whatever. And actually, it's not our role to have this debate. What would you say to them?
I would say to them, like, get over yourself. You know, nobody's interested in your virtue signaling, right? If it's racist for me as a first-generation immigrant, ex-Muslim, talking about these things of Pakistani heritage, telling you about like the problems within Pakistan, if it's like problematic for me, then I don't know who it is going to be for. And if it's, you're saying like, if it's problematic for English people, English white native people to talk about their interests, to talk about their national interests, if it's racist, then it should be racist for everyone to talk about it. Then we shouldn't be talking about this malarkey of a global majority or any of that sort of thing. Then we shouldn't be talking about Japanese people wanting Japan for Japanese. We shouldn't be talking about Africans celebrating. We shouldn't be talking about Kemi Badenoch in 2010 celebrating how she's a Nigerian candidate. We shouldn't be talking about any of those things then, right? Because it's racist overall then. So why is it only racist if English people want to have a homeland for their own country, for their own benefits? And any immigrant that is coming into this country has to assimilate and has to understand Britain doesn't need you, you need Britain. So show a bit of gratitude, assimilate or get out.
Momus, thank you very much. I've learned a lot and had a lot of food for thought there. That's Momus Najmi. He's a writer and commentator. Philip, your reaction to that, those words of wisdom, I think, from Momus?
Very much so. I think there's two things that come out. One, I think because of the headlines that come out where it's Sharia courts, people automatically assume that this is exactly the same as we see in Afghanistan and the oppression that's associated with it and all the rest. So there's something in the terminology and the way we report things. But the second thing is, it was interesting in talking about deporting people. We've already set the legal precedence by removing people's British passports and British citizenship. Shamima Begum, who was entitled to Bangladeshi citizenship.
Yep.
She hadn't actually taken it up, but she was entitled to have it, had her British citizenship removed because she was entitled
and rightly
to...
so.
And rightly so. So the precedence is set, and this can be done.
Yeah, absolutely. Philip Ingram is with me throughout the programme, and thanks to Momus as well. What do you make of what he said? 0344 499 1000. We'll take some calls after the break. Stay with us here on Talk.
Guy is like a prolific heroin dealer and hardened criminal who has time and again been up against our justice system. We want to be able to send him back from whence he came, i.e. Turkey, where plenty of people have nice holidays every year. But he is pleading and has pleaded that he can't go back because his life will be in danger.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Couple of bits of breaking news now on Talk. There has been an increase in the sentences of the youngest convicted murderers in the UK since James Bulger's killers. This is the Solicitor General has applied to increase the sentences of UK's youngest knife killers, saying they're unduly lenient. The two boys were just 12 at the time where they stabbed someone in Wolverhampton. Now they've been handed longer sentences. The two boys are now 13. They can't be identified. Were given life sentences with minimum terms of 8.5 years for the murder of the 19-year-old Sean Sahi in Wolverhampton in November. Last year, the Solicitor General applied to increase the terms, saying they were unduly lenient, and the Court of Appeal has now agreed to change their sentences to 10 years, so up from 8.5 years to 10 years. And another piece of breaking news, the neo-Nazi who had a home armoury discussing a terror attack against a gay group, well, he has been jailed for 10 years. His name is Alan Edward. He's 55 and he was detained after armed police swooped on his house in Reading in Falkirk in September 2022. A court was told how officers recovered items including a crossbow, machetes, a tomahawk, a samurai sword, knuckle dusters, a catapult, an extended baton and a stun gun, 14 knives. Some were adorned with Nazi and SS insignia, an SS-type skull mask, goggles, respirator, all sorts of things. The counter-terrorism expert called Martin Gallagher said it was fortunate the police were able to ensnare him before he followed through with any of his threats, including attacking an LGBT group, and he idolised the neo-Nazi mass murderer Anders Breivik. So this is the neo-Nazi who's been jailed for 10 years. A good thing, I think we can say, Philip?
Definitely a good thing. Extreme right-wing terror is on the rise, but 25% of all terror activity in the UK is extreme right-wing. 75% is still associated with the extreme Islamist views, but it's something that has always been there. Even before Islamist terror became a thing, extreme right-wing terror was there.
And this, we can legitimately say, because of the Nazi links, neo-Nazism, this is actually far right.
Oh,
and
yes.
and what really annoys me is the casual way the left uses the phrase far right to discuss, Reform UK or whatever. They are not far right. They're on the right, but they're not far right. This guy with his Nazi memorabilia, his skull mask, his crossbows, machetes, his idealisation of Anders Breivik, he is far right. And now he's been sent to jail for 10 years, and rightly so.
Yeah, far right wants to exterminate anyone who's not of your racial background or your beliefs or anything else, and that's physically exterminate. That's what the Nazis did with the Jews.
And that is how that phrase should be correctly used.
Correct.
And the left should be much more responsible in how they use it. We're talking about Sharia courts. Vernon in Staffordshire is waiting patiently on the line, 0344 499 1000. Vernon, sorry for keeping you waiting there. We've had some breaking news there. What would you like to say about Sharia courts?
Gentlemen, it's a fine show, thank you. I'm in Stuttgart, so I've been listening evidently.
In Stuttgart? Excellent, okay.
So I've been driving from Frankfurt to Stuttgart, listening to you, and frankly, getting enraged with what I'm hearing.
Okay.
We are a laughing stock of the world. I have to tell you this. We are a laughing stock. I just struggle to understand how a very tolerant United Kingdom allows people to come to the country and then they start openly bringing their beliefs into the country and challenging the laws of our great country.
And dictating how some people live as well, and how people live under Sharia law. I wonder as well if I could ask... Sorry, go ahead, Vernon.
When's it going to end, Peter? When is this stupidity going to end? You've got a Turkish drug baron who is, excuse the phrase, he's a wrong un.
Yeah, he is a wrong un.
He's a bad man. He's staying in this country because he deserves to have a family life. I'm sorry, if you break the law, okay, you don't deserve anything. I'm sorry, you're thrown into prison, and as far as I'm concerned, you are there for the duration, and hopefully you will see sense and come out a better person. My views are probably not my views are probably not best spoken about on the radio. I'm just fed up with the current situation. I'm a proud Englishman. We're a fine country. We're very tolerant, but we have
too tolerant
leaders. Too tolerant, Peter. Too tolerant. And you have another Peter with you, who, if only he was Prime Minister, we'd be living in a better place.
Do you mean Peter Blexley?
Sorry, Philip. You've got Philip.
We've got Philip here today. Do you want Philip to be Prime Minister or Peter Blexley to be Prime Minister?
Yeah, no, both.
Both? Okay. Joint office. Joint office. Like First and Deputy First Minister.
They're fine gentlemen who are very correct, nice, good people, just like the country that I'm very proud of.
Okay.
To death, every single day we have people challenging. There is one law in the country, and that is In England, it's English law or British law.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay? Everything else is secondary. It's irrelevant. I don't want to hear about it. I don't want to see it. If it's practiced, then you're out of the country as far as I'm concerned. I want zero tolerance.
Okay.
Zero tolerance in everything.
Vernon, thank you very much indeed for your thoughts there. Have a safe journey as well back to Staffordshire. Appreciate your thoughts. Let's hear from Ian Bridgend. I think you have a point for Philip, perhaps, on Ukraine. Ian, you're very welcome to make it. Go ahead.
That's right, Peter, yes. And Nadolig Llawen and Blwyddyn Newydd Dda to all of you at Talk there. Enjoy your Christmas. Yeah, it's just the issue with Ukraine now. We're seeing the loss of the winter fuel allowance. We're seeing the betrayal of the WASPy women. This would just be the start of it. If we continue to fund Ukraine, the impossible gap that's going to be made up...
£3 billion a year is what we're funding Ukraine, and we'll do so for as long as it takes. That's what Rachel Reeves says. That's twice. So it's 1.4... Just hold on a second, Ian. It's 1.4 billion to give the winter fuel allowance, so we could do that twice, and for the money we're giving to Ukraine. I'm not saying it's an either-or situation necessarily, but, you know, there's a lot of money to Ukraine.
I am, Peter. You listen to Mark Rutte, you know, the failed Dutch politician who's now been appointed as the head of NATO. He's failed in Holland because of his pro-Ukraine stance and his general liberalism. No, we've had enough, Peter. You know, we said that we need to accept that our pensions and our benefit systems are going to have to fund the shortfall. No, we are not happy with that.
Well, just stay where you are for a second, Ian. I promise you I'll come back to you. Philip, what do you make of what Ian's saying?
Ian, what Ian's saying is what a lot of people are thinking, and this is where the government is not communicating properly how the money is being spent. That £3 billion isn't being given to Ukraine in a cheque, and Zelensky's going out and buying stuff on it. That £3 billion is ostensibly being spent in UK industries, employing UK employees in the defence industry to increase our production capability, and then the value of goods that we produce is being delivered to them. But the UK taxpayer is benefiting from it. And in reality, if we didn't spend that, if we didn't support Ukraine, if we gave in to Putin, it's going to cost us an awful lot more, significantly more. And that shock that came in whenever Russia reinvaded in 2022, the energy shock that hit all of our pockets dramatically, will seem like a very, very, very small amount if Russia's allowed to win.
Ian, what do you make of what Philip said there?
Well, my father served in the Home Fleet prior and during the Second World War. Remember those days, Philip, when we used to have a home fleet that protected...
Yes, I do. Yeah, and we've got a home bathtub, I think, now.
We need to spend the money. We need to spend the money on protecting ourselves locally and reducing the burden on our housing system, our health service, and the general problems being created by immigration. We need to get politicians there who look at domestic requirements. We're sick and tired of all this nonsense about our international obligations. We've got to save the world. No, we need to save ourselves first, and people in this country have had enough.
OK, thanks, Ian. Final word from Philip on this.
Yeah, unfortunately, we are the fifth or sixth largest economy in the world. We are a permanent member of the Security Council of the United Nations. We're a globally trading company. We rely on trade coming from all over the globe, and therefore we rely on global stability to allow us to be able to afford what we are dealing with at the moment. And if anything interrupts that, it's going to affect us a lot more than it's going to affect other people. So we have to invest in our global interests.
Lots of reaction to what Momus said there, and Momus Najmi, who was on earlier on. Dorothy in East Kilbride says, fantastic show, Peter. Your guest, Momus Najmi, was amazing. Would love to hear more from him. Believe me, we will hear more from him on my programmes. I'm here tomorrow between 4 and 7, and the weekend, in this slot, actually, between 10 and 1. And I'm sure Momus will have a slot on one of those programmes. I'll certainly want to talk to him again. There's more to this story. I think the Times, I would imagine, will have more tomorrow. Ian says, what a breath of fresh air. Momus says, have him on the show every week. Honest, open, the kind of person we should welcome with open arms. He's such a sensible guy. We have to realise what he is saying. Islam is Sharia law. We have to realise bad Muslims are good British people. And I think you need to stop qualifying statements with not all Muslims are bad. Bad Muslims are good British citizens. It's an interesting thought, actually, and something I hadn't quite considered in that regard. Peter, while the decision on Cannes low traffic neighbourhoods is good in the context of Labour's devolution proposals, is there the risk that Labour will fill our towns and cities with mad Cannes clones who will impose the same draconian initiatives? Yes, is the answer to that. Yvonne in Solihull, Alan Miller, who was talking a little bit earlier, is quite right. You need to know that almost 100% agree with his analysis of low traffic neighbourhoods. As a teacher, I should have the right to drive my car stuffed full of books for marking, schemes of work and resources to plan termly work. I can't ride a bike with this load and battle with traffic getting my own child into the school and into work early. Low traffic neighbourhoods destroy a person's ability to work and add to the economy. Philip Ingram is talking rubbish, says Nick. Ukraine is a money laundering scheme and we need to be aware of that, says Nick. You don't think this country has some similarities to the Stasi, the ability to go into the disabled and pensioners' bank accounts? Believe me, you're next, says Paul. I just don't think those comparisons are helpful. I think the Stasi was something very, very different. I think there is definitely a pernicious, worrying idea of where this country is going. I think there's a lot of state surveillance, but we're not there. We're not there. This is not East Germany, and I think when you get into those kind of comparisons, then you slightly lose the argument. It's when people compare things to the Nazis. Some people are familiar with Godwin's law. As soon as you start comparing things to the Nazis, you've lost the argument. Bob says we're literally governed by human rights lawyers, and Francis from Wilton says Blair enshrined the ECHR decisions into UK law via the Human Rights Act in 1998. Our courts are compelled to follow the ECHR judgments as things stand. So to come out of the ECHR, we have to repeal the Human Rights Act of 1998 and more, says Francis and Wilton. Thanks for that reminder, Francis. Once again, a reminder, if effort were needed, that most of the things that are wrong with this society are Tony Blair's fault. Stay with us.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
We're talking this morning about the Turkish crime boss jailed for heroin offences. He's been allowed to remain in the UK on human rights grounds. Well, Tony Smith is the former head of the UK Border Force. Tony, I mean, this story is just farcical, isn't it? And we see it so often. We see these people talking about a right to a family life. We see them talking about, oh, I'll be persecuted if I go back to Turkey. Factually, this guy's been back to Turkey at least 7 or 8 times that we know of. And we know that he cheated on his wife. And, you know, I'm not saying standing in moral judgment of people who cheat on their wife. It's not a good thing. I wouldn't recommend it. But at the same time, he doesn't care about a family life if he's doing that. Yet we're locked in to the European Convention on Human Rights. We have the government recommending one thing, the Home Office saying he's not conducive to the public good. Yeah, we can't get rid of him.
Yeah, morning, Pete. I mean,
Morning.
I think I haven't read this judgment in full. I've only read the reports about the judgment, so I couldn't sort of give you the chapter and verse about what's happened. It does look, in his early days over here, he was sent back a couple of times, actually, by us. Managed to get back in at some point.
So
and then
we actually did send him back. He keeps coming back to supply us heroin to various people.
I think the point listeners perhaps to get across is that the Home Office have tried to deport this bloke a number of times, but all of the decisions have been as a result of appeal determinations.
Yeah.
The Home Office, when he came out of prison, the Home said, right, that's it, you're going back now, you know, served, don't notice of intention to deport, get served on him before he finishes his sentence, and then he appeals. He wins his appeal at first tribunal. The Home Office appeal against that decision to the upper tribunal, and the upper tribunal upheld the original appeal. So what is happening, and I think that's where we need more data really, very significant number of these cases are being granted by the appeals system, by the second level tribunals, not by the department, not by officials who are trying their best to deport people, but are running into legal barriers. And that comes back to your point, Peter, about, you know, the European Court of Human Rights and a number of judgments. And what I'd really like to see is more data, because, you know, there is going to be a data battle now going on between this government and the last one about who's doing more.
Yes.
It's not about the volume. I mean, it's all about volumes, Peter. We want to know how many have been granted, don't we? We want to know how many people have been granted. Foreign national criminals have been granted.
And there must be loads of information there. There must be lots of information about how many appeals have been made. You know, people who've been deported a number of times who keep coming back. And this is the problem. We can't keep them out of the country. Surely if someone's deported, you can say, right, you're not welcome in this country. How can they get back in?
Well, so I mean, I think you're right. There are people that are getting back in, but we would know. You know, assuming we can encounter, we will know whether they arrive at a port of entry or on a small boat. We will take their fingerprints. They will have been fingerprinted previously. They will come up as a previous deportation order, and they could well be convicted for another offence. But the point is, Peter, that actually we can only remove people if it's lawful to do so. No matter how many times they come back, and you know, we are constantly being thwarted by judgments, which is judicial overreach, really, by the European Convention on Human Rights. European court judges have made it really, really difficult. Now, so the big question I guess you should be asking people, Peter, as well as me, is that like what are the government going to do about this?
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
No, we know we're in a mess. We can all look back and say what a mess the last lot made of this, and what we're going to. But there is no clear. I haven't seen any clear statement from government about what are they going to do with the increasing, you know, extent to which human rights legislation is pervading immigration enforcement, because immigration enforcement officers are hugely frustrated by this. Home Office caseworkers are frustrated by this, but they cannot put the Home Secretary in contempt of court. If the court decides someone should be allowed to stay, unless we can win an appeal right the way up to the House of Lords, that person gets to stay. I would really like to know, what are the government going to do about this? I think there should be a root and branch review into our policy with regarding the balance to the communities people have been welcomed as foreign nationals as opposed to their personal individual...
Well, I totally agree with you, but what's going to happen is they'll say the Human Rights Act would have to be repealed. I mean, I'm very happy with it being repealed. I'm very happy with this idea of a British Bill of Rights, which is something the Conservatives said they would think about and would do for 14 years and never did. And I just cannot see the circumstances in which Labour would repeal the Human Rights Act. I can't see that working politically, Tony, for them, even though I think it's the right thing to do.
No, I agree with you, Peter. I think that's right. We've got a Labour government for the next 4 years. The left of that party are very much pro-immigration and pro-human rights, actually, and would not really countenance or vote for any amending of human rights legislation as it stands. We are where we are. And you're right, abolishing the Human Rights Act is really tricky, Peter, because there are other areas of law. You know, we talk about the Good Friday Agreement, for example. Well, a lot of that based upon fundamental human rights. So we do need something about human rights, but people need to understand that we've lost the balance, I think, between the needs and the anger of communities coming on your show to say, why is it this happening? The answer is it's because of the legal framework we've got. And the only people that can change the legal framework we've got, ultimately, is the elected government.
Yeah, the legislators. Tony, thanks for your thoughts on that. Tony Smith, former head of the UK Border Force. He's right, isn't he, Philip? Philip Ingram with me all morning here. And, I mean, unfortunately, what the courts say has to be obeyed. The rule of law, obviously, is important, but the law is nonsense.
Well, the law's nonsense, but is it the law itself, or is it the interpretation of the law that the judges put on it? And
well, the Human Rights Act says that essentially the decisions of the European Court have to be brought into our way of doing things, which is not the case in other countries.
Well, then it's easy for us to change it, because the government is in a position now with a huge majority to change that law and bring an amendment in like that.
They're just not going to have the political will, though, are they? You cannot see, human rights defender, human rights lawyer Keir Starmer saying, actually, we're going to repeal the Human Rights Act. That's just not going to happen, is it? No, we're just going to see more of these stories. We're going to see more of this nonsense happening and more of this outrage, and rightly so. And it could, as you say, very quickly be changed.
Well, it very easy to change, and the trouble is, I don't think Keir Starmer quite gets the feeling that there is across the country and the potential implications that there are for it. We saw a little bit of that in Southport, and that was a warning. What he hasn't dealt with are the symptoms that were behind all of that. Yes, he dealt with the rioters very, very quickly indeed, but he needs to deal with the symptoms, and this all relates to the symptoms that were behind those riots.
Philip, thank you. It's Philip Ingram, MBE's former senior military intelligence officer. He is right with me right throughout the programme until 1 o'clock. We're going to talk in just a second about two very different politicians. Donald Trump, who will be in just over a month's time, I think it's the 20th, 21st of January, that he will be sworn in again as President of the United States. Well, Sir Keir Starmer, Chief of Staff, has been sent on a secret mission to charm his Chief of Staff, a woman called Susie Wiles, and someone who may not have a Chief of Staff very much longer, floppy-haired fascist Justin Trudeau with his stupid socks. He may well be on the way out. Isn't that sad? Stay with us here on Talk.
What was really interesting to me in that article was that the Muslim communities in the United Kingdom have set up tribunals with rules and regulations for those tribunals. And if there is a dispute that's arbitrated through those tribunals, because of the rules that have been set in place, they can then go to a British High Court and get the British High Court to sanction the arbitration result.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
We'll talk about Justin Trudeau in Canada in a moment, but let's talk to Scott Lucas first. He is Professor of International Politics at the Clinton Institute of the University of Dublin, about Donald Trump and the fact that he is limbering up to be president again in just over a month's time. Scott, you're very welcome to the programme. Good morning.
Morning to you, Peter.
Tell me about Susie Wiles, because she is the pretty formidable new chief of staff to Donald Trump. She ran his campaign, and now we have Morgan McSweeney, who is Keir Starmer's second chief of staff, the person who replaced Sue Gray. And we now know that Morgan McSweeney was sent over to America to sort of charm Susie Wiles. I mean, what sort of relationship do you think Labour here is going to have with the new American administration, especially when so many of its members, Donald Trump, Elon Musk and others, are quite close to Reform UK, actually?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting question, Peter, because I think you take it beyond Trump and you take it beyond Mr. Musk and their headline activities. And that is not just the UK, as you mentioned, through Morgan McSweeney and the longtime foreign policy advisor, Jonathan Powell, going over to the US, but also other countries. The country in which I live, I know the Irish government have been talking to the Trump camp. The French have been doing it. Remember the high-profile invitation to Donald Trump to come to the Notre Dame ceremony earlier this month.
Yeah.
The European Union has been establishing contact with the Trump folks.
It's a fairly natural, straightforward thing to do, isn't it? I mean, there are all these reports today about, oh, it's a secret mission and so on. I mean, it makes perfect sense for these people to talk, especially when America and the UK, despite, no matter which administrations are in, of which shade, they are strong allies.
Especially when you consider that this meeting is not just with Susie Wiles, the chief of staff. They've been meeting the incoming national security advisor, Mike Waltz, who is a former U.S. representative, and they're talking about the Russian invasion of Ukraine, where there's real questions about what Trump's going to do. They're talking about the Middle East, where we not only have the Israel-Gaza issue, but now the sudden change in Syria with the fall of Assad, and they're talking about China. So there's a lot of foreign policy issues to be discussed there, and they're talking to the Trump people about Trump's threat to impose these 25% tariffs on Canada, the UK, and almost any other country in the world.
Do you think he will with the UK, or given that we're outside the EU and given the links between them, do you think there'll be a different set of circumstances for the UK and tariffs and trade wars, which Donald Trump has previously said he thinks are actually a good thing?
Look, Peter, the point is we don't know. We don't know because you and I both know Trump is not a politician who acts by, as it were, the rules of the game. In terms of you work through channels, you talk about the economic relationship. Trump will decide because he's in a mood with someone or because he wants to make a splash on social media to launch tariffs overnight. He's done this with China. He did it with the EU and with the UK in the first term on steel and aluminium. He could do it again overnight. So what you do is you try to get to his advisors to try to contain him, but you can't be sure it's going to hold. And that has been compounded because of Elon Musk. Elon Musk does not like the UK government, to say the least. He doesn't really like UK society, to be honest with you. And Musk, if he has Trump's ear, could basically be saying, why don't you punish labor? Why don't you punish the Brits and try to encourage a change of government?
We have the context that Elon Musk, Tim Montgomery, who is who set up a website called Conservative Home. He's a very well-known conservative commentator, been on my shows on numerous occasions. He has now defected to Reform UK. He is now a member of Reform UK and believes, he says he's no greater insight, but he believes that Elon Musk could give Reform UK £20 million, and that would be a game changer here in the UK. That would be the biggest donation, I think, ever given to a British political party. But, I mean, there are these sort of complex wheels within wheels in terms of the Trump administration, aren't there, in regard to connections, not just to Reform UK. We have Kemi Badenoch, who's met J.D. Vance, and the fact that the Labour Party, which has a very different political outlook to Donald Trump, is trying to have its influence and try to getting those early meetings in.
Yeah, I think I'll say two things, Peter, that could set up a future conversation. The first is we're almost in unprecedented territory in Britain, in that you have a party in Reform UK, which has 5 MPs, doesn't really have a party structure at this point, to be honest with you, the way we think about it with Conservative and Labour. But what they do have is they've got one national network, not yours, but another national network which is pretty much behind them and features Nigel Farage on there with his own program. And then, of course, you've got Elon Musk with not only the money, but with the social media exposure. And the second point I make is I just find it really unusual that in 2016, we were complaining about foreign interference in British politics when Barack Obama said, look, if you come out of the EU, you go to the back of the queue on trade, which was their position. Here we are 8 years later with a foreign national putting in 100 million pounds, or says he'll put in up to 100 million pounds behind a British political party, and all of a sudden, it's not foreign interference. This type of donation, by the way, Peter, would not be allowed in many countries, including in the United States.
And it would have to be done through a British company. It would have to be done through X and the version here. You can't just give it as an American citizen. I want to talk about Canada in a second and Justin Trudeau in relation to this. But, Scott, if you'll forgive me, I mean, you know so many things about so many different political issues. I want to ask you about the country you're in at the moment, Ireland, actually, in relation to Trump. Because Ireland has been strongly criticised, rightly, I think, recently, for its anti-Israel stance. And I wonder what you think about the Trump administration. Will it punish Ireland for that, do you think?
I'll stick with the facts, first of all, Peter. And what has happened here is Israel has closed its embassy because Ireland has joined. They have intervened. They have not cited one way or the other, but they've intervened in a case before the International Court of Justice about whether Israel's open-ended war in Gaza is genocide. There are 15 other countries who have done so as well. Spain, Belgium, Norway are amongst them. Israel is singling out Ireland at this point right now because they think they can put pressure on it because of Trump. Now that leads to the second point, which is, will Trump do anything about it? I have to say to you that there was very little coverage of the closure of the Israeli embassy in the U.S. There were no signals from the Trump camp that there'd be any punishment. What we have is the wider threat, to go back to what we talked about a moment ago, which is that Trump could not only impose tariffs, but that he could also try to undermine Ireland's position on corporation tax, trying to get U.S. companies to leave.
Just explain that to our viewers and listeners who might not be familiar with this, because Trump could move, of course, to stymie Ireland in terms of that loophole you talk about, the corporation tax loophole. It benefits many US companies. It means they pay limited tax in the UK. And Howard Lutnick, who's Trump's new Commerce Secretary, has said the loophole should be closed and firms should be made to pay tax in the US.
Well, in Ireland, it's not a loophole, Peter, in the sense that it's just simply a relatively low rate of corporation tax. So there's nothing going on funny here. It's about a 15% corporation tax rate. Trump is saying, well, I'm going to lower the corporation tax in the U.S., which is fair enough. But he's saying, I'm only going to lower it for companies that promise to come back to the U.S., that leave, whether they're in the Ireland or UK. And given that about a third of government revenues on corporation tax are from 3 U.S. companies, that would have a significant effect here.
Yeah. Can I ask you about Justin Trudeau, actually, because especially in relation to Trump as well, because it looks as if the floppy-haired fascist may be on the way out.
Well, without giving any labels to Justin Trudeau,
I'm very happy to. He has factually got floppy hair, and he is factually a fascist. But I'll not put those words in your mouth, Scott. No, give me your analysis.
Yeah, I don't call Donald Trump a fascist, so I'm not going to call Justin Trudeau one. But the analysis, which is the important thing here, is that while Trudeau has been in power for 9 years, it's sort of a tired incumbency. There are elections next year. Canada is doing quite well economically, better than the UK, but its unemployment rate is going up. The catalyst for this was Trump's tariff threat, because it would hit Canada hard. And what happened is that Trudeau tried to appease Trump by going to Florida, playing nice with him. The deputy prime minister and the finance minister, Chrystia Freeland, said, no, this isn't the way we do it. We need to take a firm line with Trump, the way that Mexico has, where Trump has backed off the threat and said, look, if you're not going to take a tough line with Trump, I'm going to leave my post. I'm going to stand outside government and look for a change.
Scott, thank you very much indeed. Scott Lucas there is Professor of International Politics at the Clinton Institute at the University College Dublin. And Philip Ingram is with me throughout the show, former Senior Military Intelligence Officer. He has perspectives on all of this. What do you make of what Scott said there?
Well, a few interesting things. I think looking at Ireland's relationship with Trump, Biden was very close to Ireland because he built on his Irish ancestry and everything else. So Trump will automatically not like Ireland for that. Ireland's economy relies on US big tech, and we've just seen the Apple having to pay 20 billion euros in back taxes to Ireland because of an EU ruling. So US big tech is smarting before Trump gets in and starts to impose further rules on it. So I think Ireland's in a very precarious position. And what they're doing with the pressure on Israel, they're out of step with the rest of the world.
Yes, they are.
And therefore, I think they're committing geopolitical suicide at the moment.
There is a huge amount of anti-Semitism in Ireland. It is a really shocking level of anti-Semitism, and I mean they will say it's simply anti-Zionism, and they're questioning the actions of the Israeli government. But it's a lot more than that, isn't it?
It is. Well, a lot of that's been stirred. If you drill into it in great detail, is being stirred by the Russians and elsewhere. The second largest embassy in the EU, Russian embassy in the EU, is in Dublin.
Yeah.
There's no.
Is it not just there already as well?
Of course, it's there, and it's been there historically. Yeah. And when it comes to Canada, Canada's in equally difficult position because they're one of the lower contributors to NATO, and they're a Five Eyes member, so Trump will put a lot of pressure on them.
Although my greatest question with Five Eyes is why it's not called 10 Eyes, because they presumably have 2 eyes each. And if New Zealand had pulled out over the China thing a few months ago, would it have been 4 eyes? But anyway, we can get into all that later. We're getting, at 12 o'clock, the Bank of England is making a decision on interest rates. We will have that in the next sort of 90 seconds or so. Maybe it'll be part of the news bulletin, but we'll reflect on that with Justin Urquhart-Stewart, who's economist and chairman of the Regionally Investment Platform. So we'll get reaction to that, what it means for mortgage holders and everybody else. Do stay with us here on Talk. Lots to discuss in the next hour. Stay with us.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Well, a very good afternoon. This is Talk, and the breaking news is that the Bank of England has left interest rates unchanged at 4.75%. So we'll talk to Justin Urquhart-Stewart about that in just a second. But in the meantime, I just want to remind you that you can get in touch, 0344 499 1000. We're talking a bit later this hour about the BBC being under pressure to play an anti-Starmer song, mocking Keir Starmer, freezing this Christmas by Sir Starmer and the Granny Harmers, which is apparently a contender for the top festive charts. We'll talk to John Mary, who's a former BBC producer and editor of How Do We Pay for the BBC After 2027. We'll also talk a little bit later this hour about children as young as 10 being hooked on a pick and mix of horror online, which is placing them on a conveyor belt to terrorism, which is the warning from a top officer. Justin Urquhart's in a second, but Philip Ingram, MBE, is former senior military intelligence officer. We'll get Justin's expert view, but holding interest rates there by the Bank of England, your reaction, Philip?
I'm not surprised, but you put that in with all of the other figures that are coming out where inflation is going up.
2.6%, yeah.
And we're seeing unemployment potentially going up. This is, given that the new Chancellor's whole growth plan is based on the economy growing, we're not getting the indications of that at the moment.
Well, let's talk to Justin in just a second, but let me remind you of your reaction. I want to get your reaction on the air. This is your programme as much as it is mine. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me at 72222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV or follow me at Peter Cardwell. And remember, the main number does three things. You can send me a voice note. We've had some of those come in this morning. We played a couple of them out earlier on. And you can also send me a WhatsApp text message, 0344 499 1000. Justin is with us. Justin Urquhart, economist and chairman of Regionally Investment Platform. And we know that the Bank of England has left interest rates unchanged at 4.75%. Your reaction, Justin?
Yeah, Peter, not very surprised. As you were just saying, Philip, just now, it was sort of almost sort of embedded, mainly because obviously we've had bad figures with regards to inflation. We've had wage rise levels, some baked in because of actually government already reaching agreements on some of those areas as well. And so then we've also got future rises of costs coming through in terms of water announced today. So all sorts of negative issues there. And this is the problem. And this is one of the areas, I'm afraid, we need sort of imagination, which you're not going to get from the Bank of England, and that is to try and put some confidence back into the economy. The only way you're going to get some growth here is actually get people having confidence to say that I am going to invest in Britain or my country, or I'm going out to spend more money. People don't feel like that at the moment.
And why would you invest in Britain, especially if you are, or even if you're domestic business thing? I'm going to set up a business. Oh no, hold on, I've just been hammered by Rachel Reeves because of the national insurance contributions. I mean, Labour, to me, politically, you're the economic expert, but politically Labour bet the farm on 2.5% growth for their plans. Even their own estimation by the Office for Budgetary Responsibility says that's not going to happen. We have inflation at 2.6%. We have interest rates being held and not going down. I mean, that's just not going to stimulate the mortgage market in any way. Where do we go from here, Justin?
Well, I'm afraid it just underlines the lack of experience that these politicians actually have, perhaps because they haven't been in power for 14 years or haven't got decent advisors. But basically, this whole idea of, we'll give you bad news now at a bad time, it'll get better later. Well, that doesn't work very well, I'm afraid, in such a competitive market like this. You've got to keep up the idea saying, actually, the decisions we're making are going to make some improvements. But that last budget we had was a disaster. We weren't going to add extra costs. You did add extra costs. We weren't going to touch national insurance. You did add national insurance. So I'm afraid that all that credibility has been absolutely wasted. So what do you try and do now? The answer is to actually show where the growth can come from. And we have got growth areas in the economy, particularly in high-tech areas. We have got areas which are having some expansion, and that can be encouraged by the government, not by investment by the government. They're the last people who should be doing any investing, but by giving tax breaks like the Enterprise Investment Scheme. We could do that on a regional basis, particularly in terms of some of the tech areas, making sure it's outside London, and therefore what you'd find is some direct investment going in. There is no shortage of money in this country. In fact, there's no shortage of money wishing to come into here as well, because they can see some good firms to invest in. But they're not going to do that with the government, who are putting up costs at the moment and giving me messages which are saying, well, frankly, financially, sucking through your teeth for the time being, and giving me promises tomorrow based on factors, well, I'm afraid you're not living up to them at the moment. So not a good position to be in, I'm afraid.
Justin, do you think the Monetary Policy Committee was right to hold interest rates at this level? Do you think that was the right decision from your perspective? What should they have done?
If I was being a strict economist, the answer is probably yes. If I was actually being more of a politician, but also hopefully an economist with a bit more imagination, I would actually say now is the time actually to say, look, actually there are some sunny intervals here. Actually, a 0.25% rate cut has a marginal impact, actually, in terms of costs. But will actually give, I think, some better view as to what happens next year. One of the key elements next year, with an awful lot of people on fixed mortgages maturing, finding that the cost of those mortgages will have doubled. Now, we've got used to that story last year and the year before, but it's still there.
How does that actually happen? How does that happen that the cost of a mortgage doubles? How does that happen if you're on a lower rate and then you get to a higher rate?
Well, what happens is you find yourself in a position where it's on for 5 years or a limited period of time, and it could be financed for a 5-year period at, say, 1.5%. And now when you're redoing it, it's going to be refinanced at 4-5%, something like that. And so literally the cost does double. There are various ways you can address it, and the industry itself could be more imaginative, so for the government, having much longer dated mortgages will be sensible, broadening it out so it's not just individuals, but maybe a family-based mortgage, all sorts of elements to try and actually soften that blow. But it is actually going to be very painful, often a sort of middle-class pain for those people who are paying significant mortgages. So an interest rate cut now would actually have, I think, actually a rather good sign of a message for confidence for the new year, and actually reduce some of the costs and really not have much impact in terms of things like inflation. You can get very carried away with figures on unemployment and inflation and extra costs coming through and talk yourself into a bucket. Well, we've done that quite effectively. That doesn't really help very much. Much better to say, yes, we've got difficulties, but actually a rate cut now does show that we could actually see some improvement coming through.
Justin, thank you. That's Justin Urquhart-Stewart there, who is an economist and chairman of the Regionally Investment Platform. Thanks to everybody who's been in touch, including Graham and Bushy. Says Trump will not be interested in Starmer or the UK unless it's worth his while to do so, as we are irrelevant to him, especially after what David Lammy and others have said about him. Yes, there were some choice comments from David Lammy in regard to Donald Trump, which were a neo-Nazi sympathising sociopath, I think was one of them from David Lammy, although they seem to have kissed and made up. Maybe he hasn't seen Celebrity Mastermind, I don't know. Dawn in Chelmsford says, hi Peter, when will we ever escape from Europe? The ECHR should not have jurisdiction over us. On top of this, Starmer is desperately trying to take us back into the EU by the back door. Philip, do you have worries about that? Because there's a lot around this week about the fact that there are discussions between the Starmer administration and the EU about perhaps freedom of movement. Keir Starmer says that's a red line. Greater cooperation anyway to make Brexit better, work better, certainly in terms of what Keir Starmer says.
We have to cooperate with the EU, and it's quite clear that with Brexit, the EU policy was to try and punish Britain, and we need to move on, and the EU needs to move on from that punishment stance, and therefore we do have to improve relations and have different, and negotiate different terms. Now, when you're negotiating different terms, it doesn't mean this is everything that I want, and I'm not going to give you anything, because that's not negotiation. And therefore, there's going to have to be some form of give and take. Whether that's getting back into the EU and giving away too much or not, is really subjective. And there's parts of the UK have been given, effectively, not been given free Brexit like the rest of the UK. And we've got differential across, this state as it is. There's going to have to be some give and take somewhere. Speaking of the ECHR, it should be said that's not an EU thing. The European Court of Human Rights, European Convention on Human Rights is different to the EU, but we're still within the ECHR, and that's something that a lot of people have views on, including Andrew in Hertfordshire. Andrew's given me a ring on 0344 499 1000, as you can too. Andrew, what are your thoughts on this?
You were discussing it earlier, and by the way, Happy Christmas.
Happy Christmas, good afternoon. Hiya.
The reality of it is that because Blair, North London lawyer, left the country in a bad situation, we got a North London lawyer now, because he made that the Court of Appeal, it's the highest court in the land, the reality of it is we either take the immigration part out and say that does not go to that Court for Appeal. Those appeals stay within the British legal system. They don't go anywhere else.
Okay.
Or we stay within it. It's actually black and white. And you were discussing it earlier, and you were almost there. The reality is you appeal, and then you can go there. And once they make a judgment, that has precedent over everything else.
Yeah, no, that's true.
And then in UK courts, they just look at the judgment from that court and say, well, there's no point in pursuing it.
Yeah, because we'll just get an identical judgment, yeah.
And so the reality is it's staring in the throat of the Reform Party. All they have to do is say, that is what they're going to do, and they win. And Starmer, a human rights lawyer, who sat next to a man who had someone cut up with a bone saw, he is never going to come out of that. And all it is doing is moving us closer in the next 18 months, 24 months to a general election and Labour out, because they can't.
I don't think it's going to happen for 4 years. I don't think they're going to give up power soon, and also they may win the next election. That is a possibility.
Yeah. So you've been around politics a long time, but remember, they used to say a week is a long time in politics. Yeah. In the real world, now we have the internet and social media. An hour.
Well, you're right. Things change very, very quickly, and indeed, in the last 5.5, 6 months, we've seen a very bad time for Labour and their approval ratings. Minus 61%. You say, do you have a favourable or unfavourable? So it's minus 61. So really good points there. Very interesting to talk to you. Andrew in Hertfordshire there, thank you. Barry in Lincolnshire wants to give us his views on Sharia law. I understand you worked in Saudi Arabia, Barry. Is that correct?
I was working in Saudi Arabia for about 15 years. Yes.
Okay.
And it's just 2 quick points, Peter. First of all, very good show as normal.
Thank you.
Sharia law, when I was in Saudi Arabia, Sharia law was law, obviously, it still is. It wasn't the best law, but all the expats that were over there knew about the Sharia law and let them get on with it. And as long as we didn't get interfering with it, it was completely fine. We didn't hear a lot about it except when there was executions going on. I don't agree with it in this country. I'm sure that Keir Starmer will endorse anything that comes up on that because of what he is and how he treats the English people, the British people. And secondly, I'd like to talk very quickly about the Turkish drug dealer,
the heroin kingpin. This is the guy who can't be deported because of his right to a family life. It's absurd, isn't it, Barry?
Yes. The ECHR have said that he's staying because he's his right to stay in this country.
It's worse than that. It's the courts here, the Court of Appeal here, because they're afraid of the ECHR. They've seen the different rulings that they've had previously on this, Barry.
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying there, Peter, but there's also another thing a lot of people don't think about. What about the victims of this man?
Yeah, completely.
Where are their human rights? What do the European Court think about?
And their families
rights?
as well, families dealing with heroin overdoses, families dealing with heroin addicts and so on. We're not thinking about them in this. We're thinking about him and his rights. Well, what about his responsibilities? What about his responsibility not to break the law? His responsibility to stay out of this country when he's been deported previously? It is absurd, Barry, and I think a lot of people are justifiably angry.
Yeah, I mean, if they deported him back to his own country, that human rights wouldn't apply.
Well,
he's a member of it, but
well, exactly, Barry, and that's a very, very good point, and thank you for it, Barry in Lincolnshire. There, Merry Christmas to you, and thank you for your excellent points there. We've emerging throughout the morning. There have been some news on Dominique Pellicot, who sentences have been read out there. 50 men have been involved, and we know that she was repeatedly raped, so over 400 years of combined prison sentences in one of France's most harrowing rape cases. We know that Dominique Pellicot has been jailed for 20 years after drugging and raping his ex-wife, Gazelle. Gazelle Pellicot was the person who was the victim of rape there, and Dominique Pellicot, her husband, allowed other men to rape her while she was unconscious. He was also found guilty of making and distributing images of a sexual nature of his daughter and 2 other women. All the other 50 defendants in the trial have been found guilty. They've received sentences ranging from 3 years to 15 years, and crowds have gathered outside the court in Avignon in anticipation. Well, in fact, now Gazelle Pellicot, the victim of this, who's been an incredible advocate. She has waived her anonymity. She's spoken to the media, and she's become a great advocate for rape victims. Let's hear from her and her reaction to the conviction of her husband and indeed 50 other men in this mass rape trial.
This case was a very difficult test for me, and I'm thinking first and foremost of my 3 children, David, Caroline and Florian. I'm also thinking about my grandchildren because they are the future, and for them I wanted to really put this struggle forward. Aurore and Céline as well. I'm thinking about all the other families affected by this case and the non-recognised victims. In these stories that are often in the shadows, you must know you share my struggle.
The words of Giselle Pellico there, who was speaking to the media. They're obviously through a translator there. Quick reaction from Philip Ingram here. I mean, I think the world has been shocked by this absolutely horrendous mass rape trial, and she has been a beacon, really, an incredible advocate, fearless in what she has said after her horrendous ordeal.
What a completely shocking and horrific case, and the bravery that woman has shown coming out and you're making public statements about it. 20 years isn't enough, and the other sentence lengths are nowhere near enough for those individuals that will have known what they were doing.
Absolutely, fully aware of it. We'll talk more about all the issues that are giving us a call today, 0344 499 1000. And also, I mean, we're talking, Justin Urquhart shared there a little minute ago about the cost of living and about mortgages going up and so on. Average water bills in England and Wales will increase 36% over the next 5 years. That's like an extra cost of about £31 a year. And these water companies just making huge profits, giving their bosses bonuses. We'll talk about that as well as Sharia law, as well as the Turkish scumbag who has a right to a family life, so will stay in this country at your expense in jail. Lots to discuss. 0344 499 1000. Stay with us here on Talk.
Next year, and it will be around the rise of reform. And if Keir Starmer isn't careful, and I think this is probably the most likely outcome, is that it becomes a 5-year. It becomes widely accepted that he's only got one term in office, and that actually it's just a case of trying to do as much as he possibly can in that term, according to his own agenda.
Yeah.
But it loses its direction and its reason to exist.
And without any support, because there's nothing really that he's doing that's got any support at all.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Well, Philip Ingram, who is Senior Military Intelligence Officer previously, is with me now, and indeed has been for the whole show and will be until 1 o'clock. And just a fascinating story in the Telegraph today about an evangelical church congregation in Germany facing criminal charges for holding an anti-colonial Christmas market that sold banned Hamas symbols. Prosecutors are investigating the Michaelskirche parish in Darmstadt for incitement to hatred and the use of terrorist symbols after receiving complaints about the festive event held on Sunday. I think if you're watching on the screen, I'll describe them for people who are listening. You can see some of these symbols. Truth prevails from the river to the sea. Palestine will be free. A number of factual inaccuracies in that remark. There are all these different bits of memorabilia and sort of souvenirs, essentially, that they are selling. Help Gaza, save lives, and so on. I mean, it's absurd that they should be selling this, these symbols of hate, and Germany has rightly cracked down on them.
Well, very much so. Germany has cracked down even more on people flying the Palestinian flag. You go down the street and waving a Palestinian flag, whether it's in a protest or not, and you will be arrested very heavily by German riot police.
Which is just not the case in this country.
It's not the case in this country at all.
Many, some homes, there are businesses flying the Palestinian flag and so on, and you'd actually be arrested in Germany?
Oh, you'd be arrested in Germany and quite harshly arrested. And the same across Europe, and this is where the same human rights laws apply across Europe as apply in this country. The same freedom of speech applies, but different countries have different ways of dealing with it. Having lived in Germany many years ago for a long time, even then the Germans laughed at us. They laughed at our liberalism, the way we didn't look after our own values. They laughed at the way our political parties fought with each other, and said there's no need for another war with Germany because in the UK you fight with yourself. Was a common phrase sent to me.
Well, Robert Hartmann, who is a senior prosecutor, told German media they are investigating whether criminal offences may have been committed. No suspects have actually been identified yet, and regional evangelical authorities said the reports and images that we have received about a Christmas market held by Michaelsgemeinde, which is the parish on the third Sunday of Advent, are deeply disturbing. And Pastor Manfred Werner, who is the parish leader, said he had zero tolerance for racism, anti-Semitism and Islamophobia. Well, why are you selling these things then? I apologise to the Jewish community, my community, the Society for Christian Jewish Cooperation, the church governing bodies and all those involved in the work of the Dialogue Forum, to all people who are right outraged by this contempt for humanity. Well, that's what it is.
Yeah, it is. And the apology comes out when it gets caught.
Yes, exactly. Let's talk about Ukraine with David in Exeter. Quite a few calls about Ukraine today, and Philip, of course, is a military expert. David, what point would you like to make, not just to me, but to Philip Ingram, former Senior Military Intelligence Officer? You're very welcome to the programme.
Thank you. Well, we're in a sort of holding pattern all the while Kira's running this defence review. It's a bit of a delay, if anything. But overarchingly, what is this guy's policy? He's not increasing investment. He's spending a lot of time and trouble running around trying to unify with the EU and create bilateral defence agreements here and there. But what he's not doing is replenishing the magazines currently at home with our own military. And he'd do better, frankly, as to go back in his father's tool room and get on a machine and start making some ammunition. So I'm reliably informed by a number of generals currently that we still have a replenishment and a magazine problem. So I think in the context of Ukraine, we've got two choices: fund them and back them, because currently our military couldn't really. I know there's talk now of them going over there to train and intervene or whatever. But at the moment, for quite a while, we've had this situation where our military hasn't been capable of getting in there. And you've even got the likes of Richard Dearlove, the former head of MI6, actually saying so. We're lucky to have the Ukraine fight this war because we couldn't currently.
Okay, well,
we're looking at why is he not increasing defence spending? He's literally looking down the barrel of, they're literally our adversaries are doing everything to us other than the shooting currently as a nation.
Okay, quite a lot in that, David. Stay where you are just for a second. I'll get your reaction, but I want to put that to Philip. Go ahead.
There's an awful lot in there. General Rob McGowan did say in front of the Defence Select Committee this week that the UK wasn't in a position to fight because it didn't have the stocks, it didn't have the people, didn't have the
And we've heard that before, haven't we?
And we've heard that before. The one thing that comes out is this $3 billion a year that we're sending to Ukraine. most of it's being spent in the UK. It's increasing our defence industrial base and increasing our capacity to produce ammunition and military equipment and all the rest of it. But it takes years to get it going, because you have to get the people with the right skills, you have to get the machinery to build it and everything else. And this is where the Ukraine war has actually done us a favour, because it's focused us on the boring bits that don't look good in front of ministers taking pictures, i.e. stockpiles of ammunition and everything else. And generals don't like that. They like big green or grey shiny things to stand in front of, but not stockpiles of ammo. And it's starting to build up. We're not ready at the moment. We won't be ready next year, but the pipeline is growing enormously. But in reality, the Labour Party has known the position defence has been in for such a long time. John Healey was on the Defence Select Committee for a period of time. He's asked questions about the issues. He should have known what's needed to be spent and coming in. But Labour start this defence review. It's right, there should be a defence review, but they should also have said, and it would send a strong political statement as well, that we're going to spend 3% now and move on elsewhere. I'm hearing out of the Ministry of Defence that the recommendations of the Defence Review are saying that we need to spend 3.6% to get us back onto the straight and narrow from immediately. Okay. But John Healey has turned around and said, no, go back and re-look at all of this. Now, this is unconfirmed reporting that's coming from people inside the Ministry of Defence, but that would be the right sort of ballpark figures that I would think.
David, just a reaction to that quickly. I've got to go to another caller, but just your thoughts on what Philip...
I think Philip's bang on, as usual. So big shout out to him and Cormac. I think, they're right on with what they're saying here. And one of the biggest things that our adversaries are doing is they're flipping our internal reality of a lot of people so they can't see the wood for the trees, digitally, social media, whatever. They're very good at this.
Okay.
The active measures programs are running rife. And we've got to send the message. I know who's advising Healey, and what our biggest hurdle we're overcoming is that they have a policy void. They don't really know what their policy is, because they wouldn't criticise the Tories, and they've literally come into government and what the hell do we do now?
Okay. David, we'll no doubt we'll talk about this further in these programmes. And just a reminder, I'm here tomorrow on Drive between 4 and 7, and then at the weekend, usual 2 weekend shows, 10 till 12:30 on Saturday and 10 till 1 on Sunday. Let's talk to Tony in Hertfordshire. Sharia courts are a very big issue today. Tony, thanks for your call, 0344 499 1000. What's your view?
Well, first of all, I want to say that Sharia courts have actually been a big issue for many years. It's just nobody's been listening.
Yeah.
Baroness Cox has been raising this for a long time. And I've been very involved with Muslim women who, when they tell you that Sharia law courts deal with arbitration mediation, it's a lie, it's not true, because the Muslim women that I personally, not only have I helped them, I've managed to make arrangements for them to meet Baroness Cox and to speak in front of select committee meetings.
Tell me, Tony, what it is like for women who are essentially victims of Sharia law courts. What happens to them? What rights should they have that they don't have?
Well, the best way for me today is I'll give you one example that I can think of, or two examples that I can think of. One of the ladies that I helped, she met a guy, she fell in love, genuinely fell in love with him. He wanted to come to the UK. He was on a visit, but he didn't have the right to stay. So they got married under Sharia law, and they did get married under English law. However, he then told her she was too westernized and that she dressed like a Western whore and refused to consummate the marriage. He then proceeded to take her for over £20,000, and then he went straight back to Pakistan with a little bit of paper that he served her that just said, I divorced you 3 times. She went to see the Imam at the court, the Sharia court. And their words to her were, well, you must have been a bad wife. He saw that he was bad, she was bad.
Yeah.
The entire community turned their back on her, would not even, including taxi drivers, if she did her shopping, they would literally, they knew who she was. Names get passed around very quickly within the community.
Of course. And tell us the other example just quickly, Tony. Tell us the other example that you were going to tell us.
She was raped, and the advice of the Sharia court to resolve the problem was to marry her rapist.
My goodness.
Children with that man.
Yeah.
And when those children become of age, say 6, the woman has no rights to those children.
Yeah.
None.
Yeah.
The husband does.
And those are just 2 examples of what is happening with Sharia law courts, or they're not law courts, but courts anyway, in our country, Tony. It's a really concerning problem, isn't it?
It's a terrifying problem, because what people don't realise is that there are over 100 Sharia law courts operating in the UK.
Yeah.
These are not, and that's just the ones we know about. There are many more that are operating, and the trouble is, the minute anyone asks them any questions, they will argue, we deal with arbitration mediation.
Yeah.
Wrong.
Yeah. When actually they need to be dealt with and examined much more closely, if not abolished. Tony, thank you for your thoughts there. Very, very interesting insight from Tony in Hertfordshire there. In just a second, we're going to talk about children as young as 10 being hooked on what has been called a pick and mix of horror online, which is placing them on a conveyor belt to terrorism. This is a top officer warning this is happening. We're going to talk to Director of Safe Screens. We'll also get a perspective from Philip Ingram, who's with me right until 1 o'clock. Stay with us here on Talk. Well, we know that police arrested a record number of children, some as young as 12, for terrorist offences last year. We know that children aged between 11 and 15 now make up the largest proportion of referrals to the government's de-radicalisation programme, PREVENT. Well, we've heard from Vicky Evans, who is the Metropolitan Police's Deputy Assistant Commissioner. She's also the Senior National Coordinator for Counter-Terrorism Policing. Some of the stuff that she has been saying in the last day or two has just been horrendous. She says we are seeing search histories for children, which contain violence, misogyny, gore, extreme pornography, racism, fascination with mass violence, school massacres, incel. Sometimes that's coupled with terrorist material, sometimes it's not. But it is a pick and mix of horror. It is staggering and horrific. I can genuinely say I wouldn't wish the search histories that we see in some of our cases on anyone. She says there is a rapidly increasing fascination with extreme violence amongst school children. Why is this happening? How do we prevent it, and what can parents actually do? Well, let's talk to Arabella Hasty, who is Director of Safe Screens. That's a charity that campaigns to raise awareness and deliver regulatory and public policy changes regarding the risk of screens and children. Arabella, thank you for joining me today. there will be a lot of parents out there who say, well, I do monitor what my kids see, but actually there are so many children accessing very, very extreme images at a very, very young age. And this appears to be even worse. And now we have Vicky Evans warning about this. What's your perspective on this, Arabella?
Absolutely, Peter. And this has been a really big story over the last month, and it's taken it to another level. For example, Five Eyes, which I'm sure your viewers know, is the consortium of the 5 English-speaking security services, so Australia, New Zealand, ourselves, Canada, and the US. They produced their first public-facing report since World War II on this subject at the beginning of December, because they are so concerned about the impact of the radicalisation of our children, and our children through the English-speaking world in particular. Ken McCulloch, who's the director of MI5, has said that 13% of all the people they're investigating are under 18, and they're radicalised online through this poisonous extremism. I think as parents, it's easy to think that this is very unlikely, it's very extremist, it's very rare for it to be happening, but it's absolutely not. 3,500 children were referred to Prevent last year. And this is happening across multiple platforms. It's happening across things like Roblox. Roblox is a product that primary school age kids use and play on and create and do things. And the encryption means it's very, very easy for children to be involved in, adults to groom them, and for us not to know. And it's hitting our most vulnerable children and it's hitting vulnerable children who from deprived circumstances, but also those with mental health and neurodiversity. Those are they're being disproportionately hit by this area.
What would you do? What would your advice to parents be, Arabella? Because there will be some people who say, well, just keep screens away from your kids or just keep an eye on what they're doing. Surely it can't be that difficult.
Then I would suggest that they probably either don't have children or they don't actually know what their children are up to and what their children are doing. Because one of the problems with this is it's very, very, very easy to get sucked in. And you have to be part of this environment as a child at the moment, because this is where the social conversation is. Everyone's in there. If you take your child off it, they're not in the playground.
You're absolutely right. I mean, we say, why are kids on the screen so much? Well, actually, try organising your social life. Try organising a kids' party without a WhatsApp group. Try talking to friends through playing games and so on, which so many children do these days as well. It's a huge part of their lives, and it's going to be a part of their lives. So how do we navigate that, Arabella? How do we as parents and aunts and uncles and so on make sure that kids are kept safe?
I think all the obvious things about actually talking to your children and connecting with them and making them aware of this. But I think we also have to accept that there are certain things we as parents and as adults and children can't do. The algorithms are so stunningly powerful that they are pushing children to this content because they want people to have attention on screen. We know from research that's done, for example, that the University of Kent did a big piece of research earlier this year, and they created sort of 13-year-old boys online. And they very simply gave ideas. I'm a bit lonely, I'm a bit miserable. Within 5 days, 56% of their videos were sort of incel and misogyny-based videos.
Wow.
We know the same with eating disorders. So even if you're not actively looking for these things, but you're interested and you look at it passively, when you sort of look over a video on Instagram a little bit or longer or on TikTok, within a couple of days, 4,000% more chance of having toxic eating video disorders. I mean, the fact that toxic eating video disorder videos even exist is maddening. So the algorithms are stunningly powerful, and actually we're going at the back end here. So Yvette Cooper has actually created these youth diversion orders. So you can go to a judge and you can take a child to a judge and you can stop them actually having access to certain things, but not the internet as a whole. We're not actually tackling this at the base. We need to be really putting pressure on our on tech companies. This is just absolutely unacceptable that children are there. It's unacceptable they can get into porn. It's unacceptable that the average age for seeing porn, and we're talking seriously extreme stuff, is sort of 12, 13. The Children's Commissioner asked about 18 months ago in a classroom, how many of you have seen a beheading? Pretty much half the class put their hand up. You're talking 14-year-olds. This is totally normalised. And then you go to things like county lines. Almost 30,000 children are within county lines. This is our most vulnerable kids. And they are groomed through social media. They are coerced. They are tracked in their movement through social media. Knife crime is normalised through this area. You know, child sexual material, 92% of the stuff Internet Watch Foundation found was self-generated. And of that, 100,000 were images of 7 to 10-year-old girls doing it in their bedroom. I think the thing we have to realise is that it's not about whether you trust your children. It's whether we can trust the devices we're giving for children. And our suggestion would be very much that we need to control what our kids are seeing, how they're seeing, and actually these things are really dangerous for so many other reasons, but this is just one area.
Okay, Arabella, thank you. That's Arabella Hasty there from Safe Screens, Director of Safe Screens. It's a terrifying picture, Philip, isn't it? I saw you nodding along and agreeing with a lot of what Arabella said. What's your perspective? You're a former senior military intelligence officer. I mean, you know a lot of the various aspects of this. What's your perspective?
I agree with everything Arabella says. You know, these are one of the most useful tools that we can have. I'm holding up my phone here, a smartphone. But they're also one of the biggest threats that we have to society as well, and to our children within that. The way people can access things and anything, and the extreme stuff that is pushed out, you know, and individuals are groomed. You know, this is something that the government can't deal with through because legislation always falls behind where tech is going. As soon as it gets into the hands of the police, that's too late. You know, the PREVENT programme is trying to stop people getting in there, but there needs to be an awful lot more pressure put on big tech. And big tech is making so much money out of this that they don't really care.
Do they care? Do they care?
They say they care. But the reality is they don't, because the algorithms are still pushing.
Can they stop it? Can Facebook, can TikTok stop these things?
Oh, very easily.
Right.
You know, it's not difficult. It's down to coding and down to additional policing. Do they want to stop it? No, because it will cost them a lot of money. It'll impact a lot of the revenue streams that they're going elsewhere, because these same revenue or the same algorithms are pushing adverts and other content to adults who will then purchase things within it and move it on, and that's getting the revenue in. They can't. There's difficulty filtering out with children. This is where we have to get back into the good old debate as to whether we should have some form of digital identity card, and before you are allowed to have a social media presence anywhere, should you have to log into that using your digital identity card.
Philip, thank you. We're going to continue talking to Philip right up until the end of the programme at 1 o'clock when Ian Collins is taking over. We'll talk to him as well about what's coming on in this programme. Just before we go to the break, I want to speak to Tom in Colchester. He's given me a ring in regard to Sharia law and multiple wives of some Muslim men in that area. Tom, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say about this? Hi.
Hi, Peter. This is something 18 months ago that cropped up with me. It's someone who I know very well was working in Ipswich, and he said there's a real issue with that. They've got a housing crisis over there, but one of the main issues was multiple spouses, and the main wife and husband and child being put in housing under housing allowance or benefits, but also the demands that were being placed on the councils to put their second and third wives within closer vicinity. And they would be classified as single mothers requiring housing, and they would have to put them, within walking distance, basically. So you just can't make it up, really.
It's a farce. It's a farce. It's completely. It's a way of life that we do not support and should not support here in the UK, Tom, and you paint a very worrying picture there. So thank you, Tom, for that insight. That's Tom in Colchester there. Give us a ring on 0344 499 1000. Before the top of the hour, we will talk to John Mayer, he's a former BBC producer, about the BBC being under pressure to play an anti-Starmer song. It is by a band or a group called Sir Starmer and the Granny Harmers. It's called Freezing This Christmas. I think I've seen some of it on social media myself, actually. We'll talk about that. We'll get Philip's reaction, and we'll talk to Ian Collins about what's coming up on his programme between 1 and 4. So stay with us here on Talk.
let's be clear. Elon Musk loves the United Kingdom, the home of English-speaking nations. He's got serious business interests here, whether it's X, whether it's Tesla, whether it's Starlink, and he wants the United Kingdom to do well. He wants our economy to grow, and he recognises that Labour's a catastrophe and that Britain needs reform in every sense, and that's why he's been speaking to Nigel, met our new Treasurer, Nick Candy, and, you know, he's put out there on X that, you know, we've got to turn this country around. We've got to reform our country.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Well, the race for Christmas #1 is, of course, hotting up. Usually I wouldn't care less, but apparently there is one this year about Keir Starmer. It is by a group called Sir Starmer and the Granny Harmers. And it is created by Chris Middleton, who's a 33-year-old freelance writer and marketer, with the help of Dean Ager, who is a 51-year-old Rat Pack tribute singer. The lyrics include things about Keir Starmer saying it'll be freezing this Christmas without fuel at home. It'll be freezing this Christmas while Keir Starmer is warm. It'll be cold, so cold without fuel at home this Christmas. Let's see a clip of this song, which is topping the music download charts, but on the BBC won't play it. Let's see what the song is like.
It'll be freezing this Christmas while our money goes abroad. It'll be freezing this Christmas. Rachel Reeves is a fraud. It'll be cold, so cold, without fuel at home this Christmas.
Well, that is the song by Sir Starmer and the Granny Harmers, and the BBC are apparently refusing to play it at the moment. There was a question about our Prime Minister's questions as well from Luke Evans. We'll bring you that in a minute or two. But first of all, let's speak to John Mayer, who's a former BBC producer and editor of How Do We Pay for the BBC After 2027. John, great to have you on the programme again. Should the BBC play this?
Peter, look, good afternoon. This is a confected story. You can tell it's a confected story. It's all about hyping your record to #1 at Christmas.
It's already topping the music downloads chart. I mean, it is a thing. It is a thing. It's not confected.
The chart I saw said it was number 55, but let that be. You know, the Christmas charts are important. It's a novelty record. It's purely that. So, you know, why get so excited? It's all the usual suspects. It's the Daily Mail, the Daily Telegraph, the Sun, and you, I'm afraid, on this, is starting to bash the BBC.
Well, I haven't bashed anybody. I'm simply asking the question.
Not yet, Peter.
I'm asking the question, should the BBC play this? And John, you haven't answered that just yet. Go ahead.
I'll answer it now, Peter. You know, Auntie tends to be a bit worried in these situations. They should play it at least once. If it gets to #1, they have to play it. You know, but it's a political song, like the one about Thatcher was a political song. Which did the BBC play that? I don't think they did at the time, did they?
I think I was perhaps too young to know, but I know that the BBC has banned various songs in the past. In the 60s, they banned a song called Eve of Destruction, which is a great song as well.
Yes, that was Barry Mackenzie. I remember it well, Peter.
Yeah, indeed. Well, it was very opposite for what was happening in the 60s, I can tell you. But yes, I mean, there was a question about this at Prime Minister's Question Time yesterday. Dr. Evans, Luke Evans, the MP for Hinckley and Bosworth, asked Keir Starmer if he would join him in congratulating Mr. Middleton on the song. Ed Davey also going for the #1 slot with his own charity single. Dr. Evans, Luke Evans said, as it's Christmas, will the Prime Minister join me in congratulating Chris Middleton, who wrote a charity song in support of Age UK, which has already raised £10,000. And Sir Keir Starmer said, I'm not going to adjudicate between the contending symbols for the top of the charts. But, John, you make a fair point in that it is tricky for the BBC in these things. But given that there are at least some people who are downloading it, given that there are some people who think it should be #1, I mean, perhaps they could play it once or twice on Radio 2 or something like that.
play it once or twice, talk about it, put it in context. But it's hype. Ed Davies hyping his song. So these people,
I mean, that's what popular music is about, though, isn't it? It's about hyping it and getting it to #1 and making sure you get it talked about.
It is, Peter. But look at the man who did the song. He's a freelance writer and a marketeer. That's the important part. But he knows how to market his songs. And have you listened to the song all the way through?
I haven't listened to it the whole way through, but I do know, as Barbara has been in touch to let us know, that the BBC won't play Starmer Harmer's song, but it did show Stormzy shouting F Boris at Glastonbury. Barbara thinks that's double standards. What do you think, John?
That was live, Peter, as you well know. That was Stormzy doing it live, so the BBC had no control.
I mean, there was a reasonable chance that Stormzy, given his previous political views,
I don't think so. I mean,
no.
Anything that's live. No. Look, the BBC is not in the business of being anti-government, as you well know. The BBC is in the business of trying to tread a line. And it's Christmas time. Play it once, show it, but don't pretend it's of any quality as a song, indeed, and much content. They call Rachel Reeves a fraud in there. Hang on a minute.
Well, lots of people think she is. It's a legitimate opinion. I think you might be referring to previously. Sorry, I think I perhaps misunderstood what you're saying, John. Please tell me if I was. When the BBC reported, of course, that "Ding Dong, the Witch is Dead" when Margaret Thatcher died reached #2 in the chart. So apologies. I think I thought you were talking about when Margaret Thatcher was Prime Minister. But
and did the BBC play it?
Apparently they did, and it got to #2 in the chart, so they would have played it.
Well, right, but if this gets to #1, the BBC should play it. But don't become part of a silly right-wing campaign against Starmer. Starmer's in enough trouble, and indeed the winter fuel payment was such a stupid decision. Everybody can see that, but leave him alone for it. Let him have a Christmas.
Okay, all right. Well, thank you very much indeed. John Mayer there, former BBC producer and editor of How Do We Pay for the BBC After 2027. Philip, what do you think? Should we be playing this song?
I think we should. Part of being British is enjoying satire.
Yes, freedom of speech.
And things like
music.
And things like The Life of Brian, if they don't keep playing, or if they take The Life of Brian off our TV because it's there to upset one part of the community, then we are lesser for it. So
let's just remind ourselves that nobody has a right not to be offended. I think people should be told that at least once a day in all our schools.
100%. And if this offends the government, then and they take it personally, then maybe they should look at their policies.
Well, what about the BBC itself? I mean, what do you think? I mean, they're in a pretty tricky position, aren't they?
Well, they're not the tricky position because they keep trying to say, and this is where BBC News say that they're different from the BBC, and they are, and they will report on things. So if they can't play it on the BBC radio channels, then BBC News should be reporting it and playing it in full to get it out there to embarrass them to do it.
And perhaps they will if it gets to the Christmas #1. We will see. Sue says the BBC have banned so many tracks over the years, including Max Romeo's "Wet Dream," "Je T'aime" by Jane Birkin. That was a bit racy, and Sergei Gainsborough. All to no avail, says Sue in West Sussex. Well, do you know what? I was kind of fascinated by "Eve of Destruction," which was banned in the 60s. We have the record, believe it or not, and I played it over and over again because it was banned. Well, someone who's absolutely not banned, someone who is indeed welcomed and will be, were he to sing, that will be welcome too, is Ian Collins, who will be here between 1 and 4, and he has an absolutely packed show for us. Ian, good to see you.
Hey, good to see you, Peter. Did you just say record?
Yes.
So that's a very old-fashioned...
No, it was a record. It was a 45, and we had a record player when I was a kid. I think we bought an old record player at an auction or something, for a fiver or something. And I had, Eve of Destruction was on there. Barry Maguire. Great song.
Really? Every now and again I slap on a bit of Cradle of Filth if I want to sort of wake myself up and get angry about stuff to liven up.
Do you need to get angry? I mean, I would have thought you were sort of fairly angry already.
My disposition is one of being mostly fairly grumpy about stuff. Yeah. I wear this smile with a very deceiving veneer, frankly.
It's in your contract.
Yes, absolutely, yes.
Well, what's on your show,
Silent Assassin. We're talking about alcohol, actually, the rise in alcohol deaths in this country. It's interesting. It kind of gets a bit of a free pass because we think of pubs and going out, having fun. I know you're not a drinker,
but I go to the pub quite often.
You're never out of a pub. Frankly. You own a pub. You live in a pub.
If only I owned a pub. I'm a big fan.
You also work in a pub. As well.
I am a pub.
Cardwell, he is a pub. Yes, Peter the pub.
That's it.
Hey. But there's over 8,000 deaths a year. I mean, there's 150 people a week are dying because of booze, and it's likely to be 3 times that as well. And it's not exclusively a British problem, but it's disproportionate.